Good morning, guys, and welcome out to Revolution. I'm just going to get my page set up here because I forgot to share the screen. Here we go. We are going to look at one of Mark Ward's latest videos. Is the New King James truly based on the TR? And so I was going through his previous New King James videos, or one video that he did where he was going through Chuck Surratt's material. Now, in that video, what I concluded and kept going on about, I didn't really get too involved with the issues that were brought up. Some of them I did, some of them I just sort of skipped over. But I was mostly looking at the fact that Mark Ward was saying that, Chuck Surratt is the go-to guru on the New King James. And like, in all honesty, I'd never heard of him. I kept sort of getting him mixed up with a guy called Sorensen, which I don't really know much about either. But what happens is these critical text guys think that we're all just some cohesive group, and we're all, holding hands and singing Kumbaya together and following Ruckman. We're all Ruckmanites. We're all King James only people. We're part of a cult. These guys have said that. And so oftentimes they make these type of mistakes in their logic. And so you'll see that, Sorensen was lifted right up as the go-to guy, the guy who knows all about the New King James. And then Mark Ward brought up his issues on the New King James. Some of them I thought were okay, but the vast majority of them I didn't feel were very important. And compared to some of the issues that I've found in the New King James, where it departs from the Textus Receptus, where it has mistakes in it, where it has genealogical errors in it, it causes 17 verses to be thought of as Jesus's genealogy, where it's just simply not Jesus's genealogy, where it causes Joshua and Caleb not to go into the promised land, where it omits a verse out of the Textus Receptus, doesn't follow the King James, doesn't follow Scrivener, and says that omits the words of God and actually destroys the deity of Christ. Because in that verse, it's saying God is Jesus, because it says God laid down his life for us. So it's a bit like one of those Acts 20:28 verses where it talks about, that God purchased the church with his own blood, one of those type of verses. And so there are issues in the New King James that are more weighty. So Mark Ward and the conclusions of the previous two videos that I did on his issues with the New King James and Sorensen were that he likes to go to argumentation that is not strong, and he promotes weak argumentation, so then he can go through and say, well, it doesn't really matter. What's this guy going on about anyway? But he doesn't seem to deal with the list of problems that I have, and many other people have pointed out over the years. And usually there's a certain criteria that you have to fall into. You have to be charitable. So in a sense where a lot of these guys are, pastors. And so many times they're under scrutiny. They can't just come out and say, this and that. They have to be, sort of in a sense, I want to say politically correct, but I don't want to put that label on someone like Surratt I think it's Surratt. I get them mixed up, which proves that I have not followed this guy. I have no idea really who he is. But sure, he might just be a nice guy. Some people are just nice guys. Some people can be a bit more pushy and all the rest of it, and that's fine too. But at the end of the day, Mark Ward seems to only go with the people who are the ultra nice guys, just trying to, get along with everyone. Where, if Jesus turned up on the scene, Matthew 23 would probably happen. He would be going, you brood of vipers, you snakes, you this and that. And so sometimes things need to be said that upset people. The interesting thing is, if you put the shoe on the other foot, Mark Ward can turn around and call us all Ruckmanites, King James onlyists, illiterates. And, what he does is he's passive aggressive. So he won't just turn around and say, hey, you guys are a bunch of jerks or whatever. he'll just say things like, I've found someone in the King James community who actually knows Greek. Most people don't, but this guy does. And it's sort of like basically saying that all you other people are idiots. You don't know these languages. And then he'll prop up his own gurus within the King James TR community. And so he props people up and says they're the best because he's found that he can argue against them and make a good case. So he puffs them up as the best, and then he tears them down, while people with a stronger argument are just on the sidelines like, no, you've basically just sort of picked on someone who's not really making the strongest case. And so I hope that Mark Ward watches this video. I hope that his followers do. And Mark Ward seems to have sort of changed in this video a little bit. Now, I don't think he is wearing the same clothes as the other video that he did like 9 days ago. So I think he probably did it all on the same day. But he does seem to make some arguments that are a little bit stronger and a little bit more spice in it. Not saying they're more convincing, just he's sort of attacking the person a lot more. The ad hominem attacks are quite strong here. And so I'll point out all these issues as I usually do. We'll go through this. We'll look at his passive aggressiveness. We'll look at his demeanor on all this. So Alan Stewart's in the house, and he says, when is the annual KJV Cult Club barbecue picnic? Well, we need a leader for that. So, we don't follow Ruckman or Replinger or Gip or, So I guess we'll have to nominate someone to be our cult leader, So I don't know who can be. We'll just wait until someone comes along who's really strange and weird and has some bizarre behavior, and we'll nominate them as our leader. Hell says, welcome back. So we just did an interview with Jonathan Sheffield for an hour and a half. And usually those videos go for like about 3, 4, 5 hours at times. And so I was sort of like, I've still got a bit of caffeine in my system. I think I can do a Mark Ward video. So I thought I'd do this. So let's get straight into this video.
If you watch my channel at least once a year, I think you can tell that the King James debate does not cause me to fly off the handle. I don't even let myself down from the handle gently, at least not very often. By God's grace, I stay on the handle. I work and pray to patiently instruct those who set themselves in opposition.
Well, I think it's probably because you're not really doing much live stuff. You can edit, you can get frustrated and then just edit that out. And I'm pretty sure Jonathan Burris does all of Mark Ward's editing as well. So if you've ever been on the end of Jonathan Burris's tirades, I can show you some of his recent chats with me. Now, one thing with Jonathan Burris is he was on the Textus Receptus Academy. He was saying a whole bunch of stuff about Erasmus and about TR and all the rest of it that I just knew was factually wrong. So I was trying to show him the facts, but he just kept sort of, saying, no, you're wrong. You're just saying that because you have this presupposition. And he just sort of kept just denying anything that we had to say. So eventually I blocked him, and then he was contacting me personally saying, why have you blocked me? And he was quite, like when I say aggressive, he wasn't really being rude or anything like that. He was just like, hey, what's going on? He was really quite pushy. And so after a while, I realized I'm not even going to get through to him on Messenger because he just wasn't listening. And so I just repeatedly put up pictures of a howler monkey. So it was just like, oh, okay, here's a howler monkey. And it was like, ooh, and I just thought, well, I'll have fun with it, And so it probably was a little bit rude. It probably wasn't the best way to win friends and influence people. But he was, he wasn't listening. So it was sort of like, maybe you'll listen. You're just behaving like a howler monkey. You're making this noise. I'm going, hey, will you calm down? Will you be quiet? And so, but I've invited Jonathan Burris. He can come on this show. I said, look, I'll give you 20 minutes to explain your position. I won't even interrupt. He can come on this program if he wants. I'll say that to Mark Ward too. Come on the program, talk for 20 minutes, explain your position, explain what's wrong with my position and why I'm in a cult and why if you reverse time back into the 1840s, if I had this position, I wouldn't be in a cult. But now I'm in a cult. How did that happen? Has our position changed, or has Christianity changed? And so Hell's got his popcorn out. He needs it when Mark Ward starts speaking. And so, all right, let's just continue on with this.
I'll reveal now, though, that I get privately upset, at least a little, even a little despairing, when I see people buying into the utter nonsense that is numerology, like arguing that the King James is the perfect word of God because if you take every seventh letter of the 7th chapter of the 77th book, it spells 1611 Ronald Trump, which is close enough. How could that be a coincidence? That kind of thing.
Okay, so he's sort of having a bit of fun with that. And, he does admit that we wouldn't really be involved with that either. But I just want to show you, because James White recently brought this up. Now, I'm just going to jump on the Textus Receptus Academy. Now, sometimes when I open up a whole bunch of web pages in the background, it can suck all the bandwidth. So if I do fade in and out, just hang in there. It'll get better. So I've got to show this meme. Okay. Once I start getting into meme land, that's the end of our sanity, because we have Alan Stewart's made a New King James meme. So I'm going to have to show that. I can't not show it. And so I'll go to the TR Academy. I'll look at recent media. And wow, there's been a lot of media put up lately, but that's great. Okay, save image as that. So I'll get this up. So this is did I say Alan Jones or Alex Jones? I'm really sorry if I did. Alan Stewart. I don't know. I think I've done too many videos this morning. But he has here, reject a divisive man after the first and second admonition, knowing that such a person is warped and sinning, being self-condemned. So that's the New King James reading with reject a divisive man. So the King James says reject a heretic. So you would go, oh, okay, a heretic, someone who's in a cult, someone who is heretical in their doctrines and things like that. We understand that. So when we look at Jesus's ministry, it says, do you suppose that I came to give peace on earth? I tell you, not at all, but rather division. So if you're just reading the New King James, you would go reject a divisive man. But in the New King James, you go, hang on, that divisive man would include Jesus. So corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. The New King James says they're the same person, which I thought was quite funny. So I really like that one. Okay, so let's see if I can go to the next one. Yeah, so this one here. This is the one I wanted to show. So here's James White. He's not interested in the numerology of the King James onlyists. Okay, so expose some weird King James version only numerology. And as usual, make out all KJV TR people are prone to this. In his wording, he's like, oh, well, this is what you expect from the culture of King James onlyism, which he lumps. Your grandma on the couch is a King James onlyist. Majority text people are King James onlyists. Textus Receptus only people are King James onlyists, even if they hate the King James. People like myself, we're King James onlyists, but we sort of believe it's inspired, and he sort of makes out a secondary inspiration. But then there are those who believe the King James floated down on a cloud sort of thing, or it's just redone. And so the hyper King James onlyists. And so we're all in that same group. So we're all prone to do this numerology thing. So here's that picture of the lady doing the math. But then James White's happy, but then offer in its place some weird contradictory textual science CBGM art voodoo stuff. So this is a meme I made myself. So I thought it was really good. And sometimes when I think of the meme, I do giggle a little bit. It's pretty dorky. But, James White's like, no, these King James only are getting these numbers and making up, 777 and 77 times 70, all this sort of stuff. But then he's like, yeah, well, let's look at the dating of manuscripts, which if like Bart Ehrman, when he debated Dan Wallace, he would have been shocked at Dan Wallace saying, we've got a 1st century manuscript of Mark, which later on turned out to be like a 3rd century manuscript. It was just nothing. It didn't come into the debate, where Bart Ehrman was like, oh, well, if we have got a 1st century document, I don't know about it, and apparently you do, Dan Wallace. So that's an amazing thing. But then, give it a bit of time and it's like, oh, no, that didn't work out. Like the Bible, Museum of the Bible, in 2020, they chemically tested all their Dead Sea Scrolls, and every single one of them was a forgery. It's like, archaic Mark. If you look at that, that was proven as a forgery. They found Prussian blue ink in it, and so that was a forgery as well. So oftentimes it's an art form. It's voodoo. It's like, oh, this manuscript is, it's like evolution science. They're like, oh, this is, 4 million years old, and this one is 10,000 years old, and this, they're just half the time they're just grabbing it out of the air, or they're comparing the rocks in, this circular type of thing. You date the rocks, and then you date the fossils, and they both go to each department and they look on the list and go, well, that's 13 million years old, or whatever they do. And so this is the type of science that we see a lot of the time with dating these manuscripts. Not all of them. Some of them have genuine, dates on them and certain periods of time or where they were written. And so, but some of them are just a piece of scrap that they've found. And then, like these Dead Sea Scrolls, it's like seen as really important, but then, chemically test them, they're fakes. And it's like, so anyway, which is better, the King James weird numerological stuff or the voodoo science? They're the same. They're both as kooky as each other. But James White just makes his kookiness sound scientific. And so, his kookiness is better than this King James kookiness. But the thing is, didn't the Bible Code come out? How many people got involved with the Bible Code? Or was it Michael Dresden or something like that? And I doubt that every single person who got into him was a King James guy. I think a lot of majority text, critical text guys got into that material and were like, yeah, I can see the name, Netanyahu. I can see the name of Hitler in there, and this and that. And they were just going through and making these predictions if you count every 22nd word and every 7th word. And so that's just as weird, isn't it? And so I could point to critical text guys being involved with that and just smear all critical text people as, oh, well, you're prone to this type of thing. But I wouldn't do that because I'm a Christian, and you obviously evaluate everyone on their own merits and their own beliefs. You don't just slander people and just say, well, King James TR people, they're going to do this sort of stuff. Obviously they're in a cult already, so they're going to get more culty. It's like, no, you just got to be honest. And so anyway, I'm going to structure my page a little bit better here because we want to watch this video. Let's continue.
I find it to be so degrading when people accept and repeat arguments like these. They're so transparently foolish. I feel I have nothing to say to someone who accepts this sort of extremism. I think a lot of my King James only brothers would actually agree with me on this, though I'm getting so many comments from followers of the most recent numerological King.
Notice that the King James guys would actually agree with me. It was like when he started talking about Noah Webster. Noah Webster in 1833 did an update, and he updated a few words and things like that in the King James. And he said in the preface, some of the words have dropped out of usage and they're archaic now and all the rest of it. And Mark Ward sort of does a video, like he sort of discovered this, does a video like, Webster agrees with me on this. It's like, no, most King James people they all know about this. Yeah, in a sense of King James defenders and people who follow the TR, they know about Webster. They know what he said. it's like Mark Ward was making out that we don't know there's archaic words, or the Trinitarian Bible Society bring out a list of archaic words. D.A. Waite, the leader of the Burgon Society, brings out a Bible, the defined King James Bible, with the archaic words, with synonyms to these archaic words so you can understand what they mean, with descriptions of what they mean in the margins. And then Mark Ward comes along and he's like, hey, this is like a new thing. We've discovered archaic terminology in the King James and words that sometimes you think it means something and it doesn't, mean something else. And it's like, pretty much what the Trinitarian Bible Society, the main ones who are printing, just King James material in foreign languages and all the rest of it, the Dean Burgon Society, like the leader of the Dean Burgon Society. And then you go back in history and people like Webster are they're saying the same thing. And it's like, Mark Ward's like, well, he agrees with me. It's like, no, you're the new kid on the block. So anyway, it's kind of frustrating when everything's revolving around him. Like to us, he's just sort of like this another voice that's popped up, like a James White or a Dan Wallace, but not even of that caliber. He's not of that caliber, but he's trying to get there, I guess. But anyway, let's continue.
James defender that I'm probably going to have to get on the handle and respond. But there's another argument in the King James debate that I confess I find difficult to discuss patiently with people, though I'm going to try to do it at length in this video. I hear all the time now that the New King James Version that I hold here is in fact not based on the Textus Receptus in the New Testament, even though I know it to be so from the evidence of my own two eyes, even though the New King James preface says it to be so, even though the fact that the New King James is based on the TR is a sky is blue kind of statement. But I am now told frequently that the New King James is not based on the TR, or at least not really, and I hear this both from more responsible and less responsible King James onlyists.
Okay, so you do get people, I get people coming on my thread saying stuff like that, but it's just because the King James is used by lots and lots and lots of people. It's one of the most popular Bibles out there. And so when the New King James has come along, some people go, well, there are differences between that and modern Bibles, or some people blanket term modern Bibles depart from this and that. And so some people are just lay people who make comments. You'll get that with young earth creationism. People will say silly arguments, but they believe in young earth creationism. You'll get that in, someone who defends a pre-trib rapture. They'll say something silly and it's like, oh no, that's not actually factually true, or that scripture, it's not even really talking about the rapture. Why are you using that? And sometimes, people who want to debate against a certain position, they'll pick these things out and say, oh, people believe this is a rapture verse, or people believe this and that. And the people who are actually defending like say pre-trib rapture, or they're defending young earth creationism, or defending the Textus Receptus, they're not using those arguments. And so sometimes Mark Ward does this. He'll find one comment in a Twitter feed and focus in on it, like James White does. But sometimes if there's more than one, if there's like 10 people repeat something, he's like, oh, I constantly see this in my feed. So this ranges from people saying, well, the New King James is completely not based upon the Textus Receptus, to people like myself, pointing out where it does depart from the Textus Receptus. So then we're all sort of thrown into the same group, like he's angry with these people who say that it's not based on the TR. And it's like, well, I can show you from the English, from the Greek, I can show you exactly a whole bunch of places where the New King James does depart from the TR. And so there is some truth in it. And so if I do a video saying, well, where the New King James departs from the TR, and someone goes away from that saying, oh, it doesn't match up with the TR in, it's like a NIV or whatever. It's like, well, of course, I'm not saying that there are departures as big as the NIV. And so this is one of the things that Mark Ward does, is he just sort of lumps us all into the same category. what you'll notice is Mark Ward, James White, these other guys are obsessed with pigeonholing us and putting us into a group, okay? Oh, there's some people who are doing numerology, or you're in a group, you're King James guys, you know, James White sort of did that. And now we've got Mark Ward sort of like, oh, the Textus Receptus guys who say that there are departures from the TR in the New King James, or we've got to sort of throw them into, you know, people saying it's a completely different text and all the rest of it. If some people are saying it's a completely different text, they're wrong. But then you have James White, okay? Now, James White will turn around and say that Scrivener back translated the whole entire New Testament from English into Greek. That's what he says he did. Where when you read Scrivener, he says, no, I got the text of Theodore Beza and I amended it in 190 places. Now, I've gone through a lot of those places. I conclude that about 10% of them are warranted. There is about 10% of that 190, which would add up to about 20 differences. So the difference between Beza's 1598 text and the King James is about 20 translatable differences. And so, but James White brings this out like it's a huge deal. Oh, here we have the King James guys. You know, they've you know gone away from Beza and all this, and it's like no, 20 differences isn't much when you look at how many words are in the New Testament. They've actually taken their hat off to Beza and said, we're going to use your text. But then in some of his margins, he was like, well, could go this way, could go that way. And the King James guys who had competent scholarship, any one of them could have created their own Greek text, and it would have been seen as like a powerful witness for Textus Receptus scholarship. So they could have done a parallel Greek Bible with their English, but they weren't commissioned to do that. They just used Beza's 99.99% of the time. So 99.99% of the time is about 14 words. If you count how many words are in the New Testament Greek, it's about 14 words. Now, 99.98 is about 27 words. So it's in between there, between 99.99% Beza's or 99.98% Beza's. But the King James translators formulated their own text. And so let's have a look at what David Cloud says about this with the comments of Edward Hill. Edward Hill's, he wrote quite a lot on this. So I'm just going to get this up here. So this is on my website, Textus Receptus. So Hills presented an excellent overview of the history of the received text, including a description of the various editions of the TR, which were published from Erasmus to the Elzevirs. Hills also pointed out that the King James Bible represents a unique form of the received text, and he believed it was this precise form which should be followed. So this is the words of Hills, and obviously the words in bold are seen as more important by Cloud. The King James Version ought to be regarded not merely as a translation of the Textus Receptus, but also as an independent variety of the Textus Receptus. But what do we do in these few places in which the several editions of the Textus Receptus disagree with one another? Which text do we follow? The answer to this question is easy. We are guided by the common faith. Hence, we favor that form of the Textus Receptus upon which more than any other God, working providentially, has placed the stamp of his approval, namely the King James Version, or more precisely, the Greek text underlying the King James Version. And so what this is basically saying is you have Beza's text, but you have these 20 differences. It's enough to say, okay, the King James translators, they formulated their own Greek text. Even though it's only 20 differences from Beza, that's what they did. Now, 250 years later, Scrivener has gotten his Textus Receptus edition. And so he's made 190 differences. But like I said, 170 of those are pretty much untranslatable. They're just nothings, Sometimes he's made something into a plural in the Greek, where actually the context makes it plural. Like rabdon is a staff, but if you're talking to a group of people, it becomes plural, staffs. If I said, don't bring your phone to like 50 people, well, it's singular phone, but it's obviously 50 phones, could be involved there. So it becomes plural in context. So these are the type of things that Scrivener did in changing the text. So it's actually completely untranslatable. It doesn't really matter. So really, this is the way that I like to describe it. Theodore Beza, he went and hunted down the animal. He killed it. He skinned it. He cut it all up into pieces. He took it into the kitchen. He put garnishings on it. He put salt on it. He cooked the whole thing, and then he's put it on the plate. He served it up, and then so it's his whole entire meal. But then Scrivener comes along 250 years later sort of thing. Well, Scrivener's like the waiter. He just comes along, and that guy who drops the salt down his arm like this. He just went like that. There's a bit of salt and a bit of pepper. Okay, so we understand there's 20 differences. And so Scrivener fixed them up, like places like in the woman caught in adultery verse where it says, as though he heard them not. Now there's 5 English words there, but it's only 2 Greek words. And that's found in the Complutensian Polyglot. The King James translators felt that there was enough evidence for that. So they have had that in their text. And so Scrivener has it in his text where it's not in Beza. But he does talk about it in his annotations. And so tiny little bits like that, little bits of salt, it's like, yeah, that's cool. We don't mind you doing that, Scrivener. But then it's the pepper that the 170 other places, it's like, no, that's way too peppery. You eat some food and it's too much. Maybe it's chili is probably a better way to say it. It's making your blood pressure go up and you're getting a runny nose and it's not really pleasant. And so I find with Scrivener's Greek text, there is 170 unnecessary changes, but there are 20 changes that were fine to make. Okay. So had the King James translators done a parallel Greek Bible, there would be no issue whatsoever. And so it's not even a big deal. Once you study all into this and you get past all the headache of working it all out, it's like, oh, it's not even a big deal, compared to Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, 3,000 differences just in the Gospels. That's the underlying text of theirs. And then there were 17 categories that Hoskia didn't even go to. And had he used those categories, it would have been thousands and thousands more differences that we could talk about. So anyway, that's sort of like the position of the King James. And so James White makes out that the King James was back translated from the English into Greek by Scrivener. Okay. So what I want to say is I can point out where there's differences between the New King James and the Textus Receptus that they claim to follow, which is the text of Scrivener. Okay. If I find 20 of those, well, shouldn't there be this huge disparity? Shouldn't there be this huge, big gap between them? Because that's the type of gap that James White's made out. Like he's made out this whole story that it's back translated sort of thing from English into Greek just because of these 20 differences between Beza and the 1611. Well, if I can find 20 differences in the New King James, shouldn't that argument make it so these are poles apart? And so that's what I intend to do. And what I'm going to do too is I'm going to make my own Textus Receptus edition underlying the New King James with these 20 places omitted and taken out. I'm going to omit those words in the Greek. I'm going to say this is the underlying text of the New King James. I had to back translate it from the English into Greek, and there you go. There's a new TR because they use a different TR. And so obviously I'm only just doing this tongue in cheek, but I am actually going to do it. So don't hold me to it to have it done by any date or anything like that. But as send me in your best New King James departs from the TR issue. So I'm going to throw up a few that I know of, and I'll keep my eye out a little bit more. But this is just to show that Mark Ward is just wrong on this issue. And if he's going to be consistent, And if he agrees with James White and what he's said about these, these issues being so big that it's a back translation from an English document, and make out that the King James is just poles apart from any Reformation TR edition, then he has to do the same with the New King James, doesn't he? If we can find about 20 differences. And so anyway, let's continue on.
What we're going to find is that there is a clear answer, and yet that there are complexities that must be addressed. Let's start with the more responsible King James onlyists and what they say about the New King James New Testament textual basis. I want to take some real time to quote them. First, here's Chuck Surratt speaking on the King James at the King James Only School, where he was academic dean for it.
Okay, so remember in the last video, he's put Chuck Surratt on a huge pedestal here. So I've never heard of him really. I've heard his name every now and then, but I've never read his books. I've never been influenced by him for my position with the New King James. And if you want to know my credentials on New King James, go and watch my first part of my previous Mark Ward exposure videos. And I sort of talked for like an hour about how I used to read the New King James personally. It was my first Bible. I read it for years and years and years, and then I moved to a King James position. And so I know personally what it's like to read that Bible, to listen to sermons and think, well, that's exactly what the Word of God says, to not even doubt it, whatsoever, and then just find a few little problems here and there, which open the floodgate to go, hang on, and then I've found about 500 mistakes in the New King James. And I just noticed there was another video that came up just yesterday, an interview, the Fish Perspective, I think it is, and he's interviewing one of the leaders of the New King James Bible. So I guess it's probably not one of the translators or whatever, but just one of the custodians of that text. And so, but Helg makes a really good comment here. He says, Mark Ward always warning about the dangerous King James onlyism out there, and we're all labeled as that, the scarecrow term, while at the same time is totally quiet about all the heresies in the critical text camp. Nothing to see here, only there. And that's like that, was it the Naked Gun film I watched when I was a kid? Is it Leslie Nielsen? I think his name is. He's like, nothing to see here. And but in the background, there's like bombs going off and car crashes and people on fire. And he's like, disperse, nothing to see here. It's ridiculous, that if he just looked at George Van Smith properly. Now, I don't think they were even going to look at George Van Smith, but then I think I was making such a fuss about it that it just sort of leaked out there, and a tiny little spattering got mentioned about George Van Smith in their Textual Confidence Collective. But why doesn't he look at Carlo Martini? Why doesn't he look at the at Metzger? Why doesn't he look at the Mormon who's been working on the Old Testament? Why doesn't he look into the Academy and just evaluate the Academy? And just say, okay, what influence does Bart Ehrman have? Why is Tommy Wasserman such an integral part of the Academy? He doesn't believe in a literal hell. But what about these issues? Are these coming across in their evaluation of things? So, but they only want to look at Orthodox people. They don't want to critique. Look in your own backyard, guys. Yeah, come on. You guys are labeling us all as King James only sort of thing, and then getting people who we don't even agree with, Ruckman, Ripplinger, Sam Gipp, and people like that, and say, oh, you're part of the same group. And it's like, oh, not really. But then, well, we should be able to turn around and do that same thing to you. You guys have the critical text. Who's making the critical text? Who are the main editors? Who are the main guys behind the ECM? Who are the people in Munster? But why is Bart Ehrman still allowed in the Academy? Why can't they kick him out? You know what I mean? And people will just go, oh, I'm pretty sure he's almost retired and all this sort of stuff. It's like, what about Jennifer Knust and her influence on Bible translations? Anyway, I could go on forever about that. So, but we're looking at the TR, okay? So we're looking at a critical text guy comparing the New King James with the TR. And so we're defending that the Old King James is way more superior in its readings than the New King James. So Alan Stewart says, move along, you hillbillies. We're the experts here. Yes, they're the experts, but we follow the expertise of the King James translators and the experts of today. They're not even worthy to undo their shoelace, like John the Baptist said to Jesus. Helg says the answer to the which TR question was given a long time ago by Hills. The TR underlying the KJV question answered. Mark Ward, get with the program. Yeah, it's like, and that's what I've said, because I sort of adopted that position, and I'm like, okay, I agree with that. That's really good. And I guess some people haven't known about those quotes, and so I've sort of, shared it around, and sometimes I'm asking people, do you agree with that? And they're like, yep. Like the vast majority of people I talk to and interview, they're all saying, yeah, I agree with that. And so Mark Ward's like, which TR? It's like, that one. You know what I mean? It's just so basic. But, and I think the thing is, Mark Ward doesn't know. He's not writing his material from a place where he's learned and then he's letting everyone know. He's writing this stuff and discovering it as he's writing and going, wow, I didn't know this, didn't know that. And then, 2 or 3 years later, he's realizing, oh, actually, these guys are saying it's the Textus Receptus under the King James. Oh, sort of thing. That should be the main thing that he's talking about. But I've seen him go from not knowing like anything, like just saying really silly things, to sort of like, okay, well, he sort of knows our argument, but then just misrepresenting us. It's like, oh, okay, you're not even going to say the truth about the whole issue. So Alan Stewart says, Heels doesn't count. He's not acceptable to the academy. Yeah, as Dan Wallace put it in his Credo course, Hills was deceptive. He was a deceiver. So he got into the academy and was deceiving people. And so he says that in his Credo course. And I remember Robert Truelove asked, because I mentioned that, and he said, oh, have you got a quote for that? And he also talks about Dean John William Burgon being a womanizer because he was against women voting or something in those days. And it was like, okay, we're going to look at personal politics, and that's going to come into the equation. Personal politics of back in like 70s, it's pretty full on. Calvin Clemens says, I cannot understand why so many modern versions match the New World Translation on many heretical doctrines. Do they use the same manuscripts? Yes, they do. They basically follow the Westcott and Hort style text, which the Nestle text of Everhard Nestle, or Nestle, they use the Westcott and Hort, they use the Tischendorf, and they use the Weymouth, and they also use the Weiss text. So they eventually got this down to just 3, and their notes at the bottom of the page were just where these 3 differed. So eventually that came to the point where they started putting in the margin like Codex Beza, the one that Theodore Beeger sort of said don't translate from. They started having footnotes like that, and then it eventually came to the Ayland, Kurt Ayland. He got involved with it, so it became the Nestle Aland text. So you have Eberhard Nestle was the dad, and then there was another Nestle. I can't remember his name. His son, but then it became the Nestle Aland text, and then the United Bible Society's text. They basically said, look, let's just sort of agree that what our conclusions are. We're still going to have these separate texts, but we're pretty much going to join forces. So then you have the Nestle Aland United Bible Society text. So that's what it's called. And so, like in the New King James footnotes, it's NU. So it's for Nestle Aland and United Bible Society text. So then you have Carlo Martini working on it, who was a Jesuit in line to be a pope, actually, at one stage. And so he worked on the text, Bruce Metzger, Kurt Ayland, and others. So, this text, it's pretty much the same type of, text. It does have differences here and there, with additions, but the Jehovah's Witnesses, they have followed that text and not the Textus Receptus text. So let's continue.
a time. I don't have video of this. This was a sermon that he recorded somewhere around 2010, I believe. I've lost track of the date. He was speaking to the student body. He explains what he's going to do this way.
On Thursday, Lord willing, we'll compare the Old King James and the New King James because they both are professing to be from the same Greek text.
He casts doubt on the claim of the New King James translators, in other words, to be using the TR.
No, he said they're professing. Let's go back and listen to it. As Mark Ward's conclusion is, he's casting doubt over whether it's part of the TR. Well, if it departs in one place, there's a departure there, you know. So that doesn't mean he's in agreement with someone who jumps on your YouTube feed and say, oh, they're completely different. They follow the critical text or something like that, you know. So let's go back. Let's see exactly what he says. Now, I'm not defending Charles Surratt. I don't know. I'm looking at his face and going, I've never seen him before. But apparently he's the guy who we all go to for New King James information, you know.
The Old King James and the New King James because they both are professing to be from the same Greek text.
All he said is they're professing to be from the same Greek text. He didn't say that they're departing or... But anyway, let's look at how Mark Ward evaluates that.
He casts doubt on the claim of the New King James translators, in other words, to be using the TR. Later, he seems to assume that the New King James is based on the TR.
But he didn't say it wasn't based on the TR, did he? So Mark Ward's just making this claim. I've only just noticed that then. It's like sometimes Mark Ward's videos, they're so quick and he's talking so fast that you actually slow it down and you think about it and you go, actually, no, the guy didn't even say that. What's your point here, Mark?
That's what he says.
Lord willing, on Thursday, we'll talk about the two translations from the TR text, the Old King James and the New King James, and we'll make some comparisons there to demonstrate why I believe that this is a superior translation of those Greek texts.
But when Surratt...
So, to me, he's just saying pretty much the same thing. Anyway, that's a whole nother issue. I think anyone watching that could see that Mark Ward mistakenly thought that he was coming against the New King James, saying it's departed. He's just read that into it, hasn't he? You know.
Gets to the meat of his view, this is what he says. Listen carefully to how he describes the textual basis of the King James and New King James.
Today we're going to deal with two translations that both profess to come from the Textus.
When you say something that they profess to come from it, it doesn't mean you're doubting that. I could say, I'm just trying to think of an example. I profess to believe in the pre-trib rapture. Okay, so someone else can. I could say I profess to believe in a pre-trib rapture, and so does Thomas Ice. He professes, or I believe in a pre-trib rapture, and Thomas Ice professes to believe in a pre-trib rapture as well. It's not a question over his position. That's what he professes. If you profess something, you usually believe it. You know what I mean? And I think Mark Ward's reading way too much into this. Anyway, this isn't even part of what I really want to talk about, but that's the problem with Mark Ward. He is just he's just reading into things that just aren't even there.
Receptus, those Greek manuscripts that we believe God has preserved as his very words. And I say they profess because...
Okay, he does define profess, okay? So obviously you can see up to this point, I'm like, oh, but, and he's clarifying what profess means. So let's get into it.
Some who have analyzed the New King James have concluded that it quite often follows critical text readings. I don't know that I'm prepared to say that.
Okay.
In other words,
so he said he's not prepared to say that. So I'm like, okay, I'll correct myself there. But then he said he's not prepared to say that. Anyway.
Surratt has heard.
Maybe I'll play the whole section and then because I have watched this, but I didn't really. I just sort of listened to a little bit of what Surrett was saying there.
That the New King James is not based on the Textus Receptus, but he either doesn't know the truth of the matter or chooses not to state it for reasons he does not give.
No, he said others say that. They both profess to come from the Textus Receptus. Others say that. I'm not willing to say that. So I don't think he's come to that same conclusion.
Those are the only two things I can think of that I don't know that I'm prepared to say that might mean. I'm trying to interpret him charitably. Recently, King James only leader Tom Brennan, one of the more responsible
King James only leader Tom Brennan. I've never heard of this guy. I've spent how long? Since 2008 over on the Textus Receptus site. I do videos like, you know, 2 or 3 times a week and talking about TR, people talking about Tom Brennan. I mean, maybe Mark Ward's mentioned him before. I don't know who this guy is. I have no idea. Zero idea. And so, like, some of you guys might know, like, I don't know. it's like, but he's a King James only leader. And so you see what happens here. It's just anyone who's got the same position, we're all part of a cohesive group. You know, or Young Earth Creationists, oh, you're all part of Kent Hovind's group, are you? It's like, oh, no, I'm independent. I think for myself, you know. I might agree with some of what he says and some of what other things I disagree with, you know. Oh, no, you're a Kent Hovindite. Okay. Oh, okay. You know, it's just a scarecrow term, King James only.
James Onlyists out there for sure did something quite similar to Surrett. Now, this matters to me, and I think it should matter to all people of integrity, Christians who wish to defend the King James. I have it right here. Actually, I have the God Bless the USA Bible that Donald Trump is hawking right now.
Okay, so what I'll quickly do is I'll go and show you some departures from the TR. So you know that I'm not going to have this, you know, big ending or anything like that. It's just going to be, let's have a quick look at it. You'll have to agree that these are departures from the Textus Receptus in the New King James, and then we'll listen to, you know, Mark Ward get all upset that people are making these type of claims. Okay, so New King James version. Okay, so this is my website, and this page has been like this for, like, I guess nearly 10 years now. I add to it every now and then. I'll find something and add to it. It's not comprehensive, but we can see down the bottom I've actually made a section, departures from the Textus Receptus. And so I do underline, you know, of evil and the evil one, okay, but that's just interpretation. Where it's a departure from the Textus Receptus is actually hologos here. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay. So it omits these words and your, okay. So it says, but let your yes be yes and your no, no. Where the King James says, let your communication be yes, yes, no, no. So the word communication, hologos, is omitted. And then it adds and your. And finally it changes, you know, from evil to from the evil one. And so, you know, that could be considered an addition as well. But I didn't really go that much into that. I'm mostly just sort of looking at the logos issue. I've got the issue of a wedding hall, which is hogamos, where nymphon is the wedding hall. And so, and that's, Sinaiticus has that reading. So basically, the New King James follows the modern versions of wedding hall, although it has hall in italics. Okay. So, you know, that if it's got in italics, well, I guess they're not saying it's a completely, you know, a Textus Receptus issue sort of thing. And they are saying, they are admitting that that is added. But where are they getting it from? Obviously, this is from the critical text. So they've got a critical text reading in the italics, which is, so they're not following the Textus Receptus purely there, are they? Matthew 24:13. So that one there, I would probably not use that as a strong example. I've just got every type of example here. It's not in order of strength, or I haven't made this just for this video. I'm just going through and going, okay, what have I got here? But he that endureth unto the end, the same shall be saved. Okay. New King James says, but he that endureth unto the end shall be saved. Okay. So the same is implied, but it does have the word of dos. So this is omitted in the New King James, and it follows the NIV reading. So Luke 1:35 has the holy thing that should be born of thee shall be called the Son of God, where the New King James says that holy one is to be born will be called the Son of God. So it doesn't say of you, that would be an update of King James. So the exu, which is translated of thee, is omitted in the New King James Version following the Nestle Alarm text, as well as the 1550 of Stephanus. So this is an argument that Mark Ward makes, or it follows other TR editions. And so we're going to look into all that as well. And so, but why then doesn't it say in the preface to the reader, well, we followed the text of Scrivener, but every now and then we went back to another reading, like, what's stopping them from going to the Complutensian then? What's stopping them from going to the first edition of Erasmus and just omitting the Communiohenium there? Obviously we don't agree with everything labeled TR. We agree with the 1598 of Beza. That's the closest to the King James, and we agree with Scrivener. We don't agree with his 170, tiny little issues, or the rough breathing and smooth breathing and things like that, which we think are just not really translatable. We don't have to agree with all that. But but the New King James guys apparently have gone to Stephanus. That's what Mark Ward is saying. But it just so happens also to agree with the critical text as well. So here we have John 10:6. This parable spake Jesus unto them. And so New King James has Jesus used this illustration, omit. So unto them, ufdois, is taken out. So to them is omitted in New King James following the NIV. There's nothing to do with the TR reading there. Nevertheless, I live, Galatians 2:20, that's omitted. And so I do talk at length about this. So I may as well, since I'm doing this video on this, I may as well bring this up. So I do have a little bit more on that issue here. So the there, nevertheless, is turned into a semicolon. Okay. So I've been crucified with Christ. So it is changed to that. So that's omitted. And it says, nevertheless, I live. Okay. So we see 6 aspects of the King James reading. It says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, the there, I live. Yet not I, but the there, Christ lives in me. So there's 6 aspects to this. The King James only has, the New King James only has 4. I've been crucified with Christ. Okay, thumbs up. But it should have nevertheless, but it doesn't. It says, it is no longer I who live. Okay. Then it says, but Christ lives in me. So there's only 4 aspects to that. So the entire reason for the inclusion of there is the seeming contradiction between being crucified and alive at the same time. There being represented by a semicolon here omits the contrasting themes unnecessarily. I am crucified, but I live. There, but I live. So I'm crucified, but I'm alive. I'm living. Not I, but Christ lives in me. So they've omitted that, and it's changed it. The New King James says, I've been crucified. It's no longer I that live, but Christ lives in me. And so it misses the aspect of, I'm alive. Yes, it says that in the end, Christ lives in me, but it says that I'm alive. So here it just says, it's no longer I that live. So it's a change. Okay. So let's get back down to the departures from the TR. Titus 2:4, that they teach a young woman to be sober. So actually, this is not an issue with the underlying text. Oh, yes, it is. Sorry. The difference is not a difference in the underlying text, okay? But obviously it's been omitted here. It says, but they admonish the young women, omit, to love their husbands. So to be sober is deleted from there. This is probably the biggest case, and I'll explain this whole thing. I'll actually go there. Now, I explained it in my first video just recently, but I'll just quickly go through it again. The 1611 has love of God. Okay, so that follows, I'll just open these pages up here, follows the text of Theodore Beza, and it's also in Scrivener's as well. So if we go, okay, is it in the Textus Receptus? It's in Beza. So in the King James, they don't have an italic there at all. Hereby proceed with the love of God because he laid down his life for us. So we can see that clearly. Now, if we look at Beza's text, he clearly has the love of God. So to Theo is there. So here we have the love of God, Charitatem Dei, in his Latin translation. So Beza did a Greek text, and then he did a Latin translation of that Greek text, and he shows the Latin Vulgate, and then he also has underneath that his annotations. So he has Charitatem Dei, and here he has to Theo. So it looks like an S there, but it's actually a upsilon. So and he talks a bit about the Complutensian, Cyrus, Syriac, perhaps. So that's all in Latin. So clearly he has it in his Greek and he has it in his Latin translation of it. So the underlying text, it's there. So there's no italic in the 1611 there at all. But what happened with Blaney? So Blaney came along and he did an italic there, okay? So why did he put an italic there? Well, there is another reading in 1 John, and you probably all know of this reading. It's 1 John chapter 2, verse 23, where it has, he that acknowledgeth the Son hath the Father also. So that was all in an italic. Why was that? Because Beza has it in his text. It's in the underlying text, but Stephanus didn't have it. So it's Beza worked on the text, and he said, no, that should be in there. So the Complutensian, was it the Complutensian? I'm not sure which edition had it, but Beza has it. So that's the one the King James followed 99.99% of the time. And so what Blaney did in his 1769, he thought, well, they've got italics there. They should have an italic here because Stephanus doesn't have of God here. Okay, so it's like, okay, I'll put that in. So it's not a problem with Beza's text, but it's actually the earlier editions that are labeled Textus Receptus. That wasn't in the 1550 or something like that. So he's just trying to be consistent and go, well, if they've italicized those other words, they should really italicize this one too. So that's what he's done. Now, the Trinitarian Bible Society, they actually print 1 John chapter 2, verse 23 with he that acknowledgeth the Son hath the Father also. They don't have any italic there anymore because there's sufficient manuscript evidences all over the place. And it's like no one's even really questioning in that. And yeah, critical text guys, they have that in their Bibles as well. So there's really no complaint about it. So people are like, well, just put it in there without an italic. And obviously it's in Beza. And so sometimes the italics in the King James, like they're not, that's why we defend all the words of the King James. We don't defend all the typesetting. Okay. I don't really agree with Blaney putting this in italic because it makes you confused to think, well, this italic, is this in Beza? You know, is it of God, just not there? So this is what the New King James guys thought because they omit of God in the New King James. Here it just says, by this we know love because he laid down his life for us. So the of God is omitted there. Okay. So they don't even have a footnote in the New King James. So they just think that this is not in the TR because it's in italics. That's what they thought. They don't even have a footnote there. This shows sloppy scholarship. There's no footnote. They omit it when it's actually, they say in the preface, oh, we follow Scrivener's text, but if you look at Scrivener's text, he has to theo here. Now, the Westcott and Hort omit that as well. So it's not in the 1550 of Stephanus, but it's also not in Westcott and Hort. So, sometimes Westcott and Hort are in agreement with, some of the departures in the earlier TR editions. So clearly that is not, the New King James is not following the Textus Receptus there, is it? In a sense of the Textus Receptus that they claim to follow, Scriveners, they're not following that. It's not a New King James reading, is it? It's not a King James reading. King James reading is of God. That's what it says. So they've actually gone back to the 1550, which they don't say they do in the preface, or they've just gone with Westcott and Hort. They've just gone, it's not in the text, and they've not even put a marginal note there, which is to me, it's quite amazing. So whilst there has been criticism over the italicized words to theo of God in this passage, it is almost always seen as an error by Blaney. So, some people criticize Blaney for that. I've sort of given him the benefit of the doubt that he was trying to reconcile, some of the italics in the previous chapter and things like that, which I talked about. So I really probably need to explain that in this here, but I haven't got it there. The original 1611 does not have any italic here, and Scrivener includes it in his Textus Receptus that the New King James Version claims to be based upon. Scrivener notes that Westcott and Hort's text omits to theo, so the New King James clearly departs from the TR here, and also the King James Version. Beza's 1598 clearly has to theo, and he translates it into Latin, Charitatem Dei, the love of God. While earlier TR editions and English Bibles omit the words, it is abundantly clear that Beza, Scrivener, and the King James Version of 1611 had the words here. While the italics of Blaney here are controversial, as most see them as unnecessary, the omission of the words from the New King James that claims to be merely a New King James is clearly a departure from the TR text. So I don't know how anyone can get around this. It's like probably the best example of a departure from the TR. And so let's get back to, so then Jude. So this is one I think Mark Ward brings up. When I gave all diligence to write to you of the common salvation. So here it has concerning our common salvation. And so Textus Receptus, the majority of manuscripts have the common salvation. But Sinaiticus and Vaticanus have our common salvation, and the New King James follows it. Agreeing with the modern corruptions, the New King James follows the critical text here. The Textus Receptus has perites, the, koines, soterias, whereas the critical text has perites, koines, imun, our. So that oftentimes these words are added or subtracted in these modern versions, or sometimes they're changing from the plural to the singular, and so it has it here as well, our. So the difference is the or our. So it's clearly a departure from the Textus Receptus. It's mistranslated there. It doesn't follow the TR. So this is not an exhaustive list. This is just over the years. I'm like, there's an interesting thing. They actually depart from the TR there. Let's put it in there, because sometimes that affects people's reading of doctrine. You're defending a doctrine. You're about to do a debate on something, and it doesn't have the same words in like the New King James. And you're like, oh, hang on. Or, this is an issue where it's the same underlying Greek text. Or look at these two examples. Same underlying Greek text, but it has, for verily he took not on him the nature of angels. So Jesus didn't take on him the nature of angels, but he took on him the seed of Abraham. He became a Jewish man. Okay, so anyone understands that. Anyone who's Bible believing, born again, you understand doctrine, you would read that and say, yeah, Jesus didn't become an angel. He's not Michael the Archangel or anything, or he didn't become like an angel. He became the seed of Abraham. He became a Jewish man, okay, born of a virgin. Now, New King James says, for indeed he does not give aid to angels, but he does give aid to the seed of Abraham. Like, what does that mean? Doesn't give aid? It's like, okay, has this become like a World Vision song? Yeah, we are the world. You know, he doesn't give aid to angels. Okay, what sort of aid? So God doesn't give any aid to he doesn't help the angels. Okay, I didn't know that. And then it's like, but he does give aid to the seed of Abraham. What sort of aid? Like, what are you talking about? So that's, to me, that's just a ridiculous reading. But look at this. This is a really ridiculous reading. Hebrews 3:16. For some, so in the old way, in the old King James, some can also mean a vast majority. You know, it's not saying some a tiny bit. Some just means some. You know, it means that not the majority, but it could be the majority. It could be a small group. Okay, so some, when they heard, did provoke. Okay, so Egypt in Egypt, the Israelites, they were a whingy group. They provoked God, and so it wasn't good for them in the end. But it says, howbeit, however, not all that came out of Egypt by Moses. So we know Joshua and Caleb, good on them. They had faith. They went into the promised land and they took the land. Legends. And so it says, for some, when they heard, they did provoke. But, howbeit, not all. So Joshua and Caleb. So let's look at the New King James. It says, for who having heard rebelled. Okay, so who having heard rebelled. Okay, so if I was to answer that question, because it's got a question mark, it's like, okay, well, who heard rebel? Well, that was the majority of the Israelites, but Joshua and Caleb, they were still faithful. Okay, so we're good there. Indeed, was it not all who came out of Egypt led by Moses? If that's a rhetorical question, no, it wasn't all. Joshua and Caleb didn't rebel. So it destroys the historical narrative of Joshua and Caleb going into the promised land. How silly is this reading? So this is the sort of stuff that we see all the time. Problems in the text, mistranslations. And so, but maybe I'll leave all that open. I probably won't go back through it again, but let's just continue on with Mark Ward. So I'll just catch up with some of these comments. So Calvin Clemens says, so I assume that those who promote and use modern versions also deny the deity of Christ, although they would never admit it. No, that's not a good assumption. It's a bit like, you can have someone like a T.D. Jakes, deny the Trinity and actually believe in like modalism, being sort of like a oneness Pentecostal guy. But people who follow him can be full Trinitarian, but they just don't know that he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Or people can follow an ESV and NIV, and as I've said, a lot of the time it can be just the influence of a church or the group you're with. Well, they're Trinitarian and they believe this and they believe that, and so even if you put a really terrible Bible version in amongst them, they're traditional. They're still going to believe, like say an Anglican type of church or whatever, they're still going to believe the certain things that they've believed for years and years. So some Baptist churches are like that they swap from the King James to the ESV, and it's like, see, nothing changed. But that's because they're not really just getting everything from the Bible, are they? They're getting it from tradition, from their church, from their denomination and all that. And so, but if you were just a new Christian and you grabbed the NIV or you grabbed the ESV, you would come to certain conclusions about God, about Jesus, about heaven, about hell, that probably wouldn't be healthy. And the thing is, too, it's not so much just an omission or an addition. Oftentimes it's the changes. And so you might have, 50 verses that back up the deity of Christ. But if you've changed like 15 of them, it's weakened in the Bible. Like, say, the whole concept of fasting in the Bible is pretty much gone in the modern versions. It's almost deleted. So I often encourage people to not just do a word search for fast or fasting and like do that, but look at words like I hungered. You know, oftentimes Paul's just sort of in a roundabout way saying we're fasting. You know, so Helg says, why is King James Version only so dangerous? Is KJV taking away from any of the basic Christian doctrines? For Mark Ward, King James Version onlyism is worse than any variant reading. Well, yeah, it's like he's an apologist. He's an apostle, for us. He has the mantle of God. God's calling on his life is to reach us who are trapped in King James onlyism. Now, I understand if he wants to educate people who are following, you know, Sam Gipp and some of his concepts, but see, at the end of the day, if I turned around and said you only had one opportunity to preach to all your friends and family, and you had to pick between the following preachers, you know, you had to get either Gail Replinger, Peter Ruckman, or Sam Gipp, or you had to get Bruce Metzger, Kurt Aland, or you know, who else is? I'm just trying to think of anyone else who's just not like a Catholic or something, you know, or Westcott. You know, who would you get to preach to them if they had half an hour opportunity? You would probably say, well, at least Peter Ruckman and Ripplinger and Gipp preach the gospel. You know what I mean? So even our lowest hanging fruit that they're saying, oh, these guys are just horrible and all the rest of it, you know, Stephen Andersonites and all that. It's at least they'd preach a gospel. You know what I mean? These other guys, what would they say? You know, have they even won a soul? Do they even believe in that? Most of these guys are just liberals to the back teeth. So anyway, they're just like, it's like a functioning alcoholic. These guys are just functioning Christians. They're, well, in a sense, that's not really a good example, but you know, you guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so Alan Stewart says, Calvin, the modern version users are borrowing Orthodox theology and they haven't really done the study. Yeah, so that's one of the things. They've just been scared away. The King James Version scarecrow, they just lift that up and put it in the paddock and no one goes into that paddock. They're like, don't go in there. You know, it's like the Lion King. Don't go down to that dark, spooky area. You know, that's where the hyenas live. And so let's continue.
I think it should matter to King James only is what I'm talking about here. I genuinely think that Brennan and Surratt are people of integrity who have a blind spot, and I hope they'll listen to me. It was Brennan's recent comments in a video that I'm going to show you that provided the impetus for the video that you're now watching. Brennan and his co-hosts on their Issues podcast were politely answering audience questions, and Caleb Richardson, a gracious person whom I happen to know pretty well, asked Tom the very question I've been asking and asking and asking. This is how he responded.
Let me get to the second part of Caleb's question. We've tried to answer it as honestly as we can. Whether it's acceptable to him or not, he'll have to answer. The second part of his question, Caleb's question, was this. I also didn't connect any of your arguments to your rejection, I assume, of the two modern translations from the TR, the MEV and the NKJV. I would be interested to hear how the NKJV and MEV fall short of your right text, right method standard. So our overall approach is that a translation needs to be the right from the correct text with the correct means of translation. And his point is, well, if the NKJV and the MEV are both from the correct text with the correct mode of translation, why aren't they acceptable?
When I heard this, I got excited. I get so few clear, straightforward answers to this simple question. Let's listen in.
In relation to the NKJV, let me bring up that first. I have read conflicting arguments as to its textual basis. So I realize that it claims to be from the TR, or at least the TR family, loosely speaking. And again, don't hang us on that. We're just looking at two basic families. Okay, one's a cousin of a brother-in-law, but whatever, two basic families. And the NKJV claims to be from the same family as the King James. And there is evidence in places that it does follow the TR readings from things I've read. There is also evidence I've read in other places that where the NKJV departs from the King James, because in places it does depart from the King James, doesn't just reword it, some places it departs from it, that when it departs from it, it's embracing the critical text or the opposite text. So I've read both sides of that, but to me it boils down to this. I'm not sure that it seems to be, from what I can tell, that the NKJV follows the TR, except when it doesn't. So I don't grant it as being from the same. It's not the same as the other argument if it's genuinely a new translation from the TR, because there are at least there claim to be additional translations from the TR.
At first, this might sound even-handed. Neither Surratt nor Brennan is coming down hard on a position. They're just reporting both sides. But on some points of verifiable fact, it's wrong to be even-handed. I'm not even-handed about whether or not the New American Standard Bible or NIV are based on the Textus Receptus. They're not.
But if they're claiming to be from the Nestle-Aland 28th edition, and we go, well, this reading, it departs from the Greek here, which we can show all the way through their translations. They're really, there's sloppy scholarship done. And so we can point out, well, this departs, the Hebrew, there's issues in the Hebrew. And see, I didn't even go through the omissions in the Hebrew. Maybe that's what I should show you on my other article. So when you look, when it's just talking about the New King James, which this whole video is about, it's not just the TR. So you got to go to the Masoretic text. And so then we see lots of omissions. And so and the city is changed to Ir here. Out of that land went forth Asher, and it says he went to Assyria. So that's different. Seeds is into descendants, but that's not really what I'm looking at. So 2 Kings, he went up against the king of Assyria. This one, he went to the aid of the king of Assyria, which even the New King James has in their parallel account in 2 Chronicles. It agrees with the King James. It's so it has a contradiction in it. Look, Shimei is just omitted. So these are departures as well from the Hebrew. So we see the King James here, we see Lord here. Lord is put in italic there, but then it's just omitted. So the original 1611 does not have any italic or footnote here. Here it has and not increased the joy in the King James, but here it has and increased its joy. So the word not, it's just, it's not following the King James. It's not following the Hebrew. So I've got quite a few examples here of cast their sins into the depths of the sea. You will cast our sins into the depths of the sea. So look at this. Amazingly, the New King James says in the footnotes, Micah 7:19, literally there, agreeing that the King James version is correct. But they have it our. And so just as also the ESV footnotes tell us that the Hebrew reads their sins. So why aren't they going with the Hebrew? The New Revised Standard Version also reads our sins, like the New King James does, but the New Revised Standard Version informs us in their footnote that the reading of our sins comes from the Greek Septuagint and the Syriac and the Vulgate, while the Hebrew says their sins. So even these modern versions are saying the King James is correct. The New King James departs from that. So this is damning evidence against what Mark Ward's saying, that they went, that in their footnotes they say literally there. So what more can you say to that, But at least in their preface to the version, they told us that they would follow the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint, and other flawed texts. So that's why most people don't. That they're arguing with TR, because when you get into the Old Testament, if there's a change, we just went to the Dead Sea Scrolls there, or we just went to the Sumerian Pentateuch, or we went to whatever we felt like going to at the time, the Vulgate or whatever. We didn't follow the Hebrew there. So at least they've omitted it in the preface. But in the preface to the Textus Receptus, they've said that it is Scrivener's text. And so I've shown you departures from that text in the Greek there and in the English. And so let's move that off the screen and let's continue.
They say they're not, and you can go look for yourself, as I have repeatedly done, at whether they match up with the TR tradition at hundreds of places of textual variation in the New Testament. And if you can follow me as I enter, if possible.
So what Mark Ward does now is he goes, so let's look at the last 12 verses of Mark. In the critical text, it shouldn't be there, but in the Textus Receptus, it's there. Let's look at the New King James and the King James there. It's like, why are you looking everywhere else except for where someone like me is showing. You know what I mean? Because he's already lifted these guys up as the gurus of the New King James. Their arguments are the strongest ever, you know, and then so he puts that up as a straw man and then tears that down and goes, see, their arguments were nothing. And it's like, well, why don't you deal with these verses, you know? And I mean, clearly this is departures from the Textus Receptus. But anyway, so Helg says, one of the worst renderings of Hebrews 2:11 can be found in the Revised Standard Version. For surely it is not with angels that he is concerned, but with the descendants of Abraham, versus the King James took on him. Yeah, that's really bad. That verse is just mutilated in modern versions. Alan Stewart says that was pretty clear from those guys. Yeah, and I don't see any type of deception, but Mark Ward's doing his commentary on what they've said, and it's like, well, no, they're making out this is deceptive.
Even touchier territory. Consider an issue that roiled the 24-hour news cycle some time ago, the size of the crowd at Donald Trump's January 2017 inauguration.
Okay, so let's go back and just hear what he says. He's talking a million miles an hour. He's like, bah, 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 yeah.
At hundreds of places of textual variation in the New Testament. And if you can follow me as I enter, if possible, even touchier territory, consider an issue that roiled the 24-hour news cycle some time ago, the size of the crowd at Donald Trump's January 2017.
The size of the crowd at Donald Trump's inauguration. I mean, that's, you know, he's saying we've got the facts on our side. This is fake news, whatever. Well, I can show you where it's not fake news, Mark. Why don't you deal? You know, if you're only going to deal with certain reporters on that, yeah, the CNN. We only look at CNN, yeah, and we debunk CNN. And so, well, look at somewhere else. You know, think.
Inauguration. This is the controversy that gave rise to Kellyanne Conway's infamous eternal phrase, alternative facts. We have alternative facts, she said. Then White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer claimed that Trump's crowd was, quote, the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe. As fact checkers have pointed out, however, many of Spicer's claims simply did not hold up. You could look with your own eyes at photos of the crowd sizes and see that his claims were not true.
Well, you can look with your own eyes at the things that I just put up on the screen and see that the things that Mark Ward is saying. It's not true. So he's actually, this comes against his own argument. But as A. Hannah said, gaslight, gaslight. Mark Ward is gaslighting. So welcome to the show, A. Hannah. Funny man, A. Hannah. He always gets me going. So Mark Ward is anti-Trump.
I have to believe that some people who heard from a friend who was usually trustworthy that Trump's crowd size was the biggest ever, they're not morally culpable for believing this claim. But leaders in the debate are.
So notice these leaders in the debate are. So because we're just dummies who just followed the leader, you know, we're never thinking for ourselves. We're never coming to our own conclusions. I had never seen this Tom Brennan guy ever in my life. I've never seen Surratt. I don't know who. If you show me a picture of Soren, I don't know who he is. But apparently these are our leaders. And so Mark Ward said they are, so they must be, you know. Where they're the Jim Joneses of our KJV only cult, you know.
Journalists, for example, have a responsibility to do some homework before repeating verifiable claims. When something is directly, empirically verifiable, and when it's central to an important debate, the way the textual basis of the New King James is, responsible participants in that debate, leaders in that debate, cannot and should not be even-handed. There is only one responsible side. I reported Brennan's words to a missionary friend of mine, and he said to me very insightfully, that comment is kind of like your grandma posting an outright conspiracy theory about how Barack Obama secretly included requirements for Satan worship in the Affordable Care Act. And when you say, Grandma, that just isn't true, you can't say that. She replies, well, I wouldn't put it past him.
Now, this one thing alone should show you how ridiculous the claims of Mark Ward are. Like, did you hear, like, you listened to Brennan and what he talked about? He's like, well, you know, yeah, some people say that there's differences. I'm not really sure, but apparently it's following the Textus Receptus, except where it isn't. And to me, I've done the homework, and I would say the same thing. Yeah, the New King James, in the beginning of my article, yeah, and this is, I've had this website since 2008. I write here, I say, it is generally acknowledged that the problems which are associated with the New King James are not as numerous or as serious as those found in other versions. So we acknowledge it. It is, it says here, the New King James is a modern version of the Bible based on the Textus Receptus Greek and the Hebrew Masoretic texts. And then I go through and clarify, from the horse's mouth, talking about fasted and talking about price, and it's an update to the King James and all that sort of stuff. And so I've got a whole section on the underlying text, and so this is like an alien conspiracy, what that guy said. So Alan Stewart said, I'm with A. Hannah. Mark Ward needs to find us better leaders. Yeah. Hopefully he can, A. Hannah says, Mark Ward took an extra injection of cringe for this video and apologetic analysis. Well, this is why I had to do this video. I can't control myself at times. I know Mark Ward says, I'm totally in control and all the rest of it. I think he's out of control. This is out of control. Like, if he's going to say, someone's saying, well, the Textus Receptus based New King James, when there's departures from the King James and the underlying Greek, it's based on the Textus Receptus, except where it isn't. That makes sense. I don't know who Tom Brennan is, have no idea, but what he's just said makes sense. But Mark Ward's like, no, it's like your grandma talking about Obamacare with the aliens, and no, it's not a conspiracy theory. You can't just bring up the word conspiracy theory and think everyone's just going to agree with you, Mark. It's like, so hang on, I'll mention conspiracy theory and everyone will be on my side. Well, I mean, they've proven that 80% of people just follow. And if there is a charismatic, convincing voice, 80% of people will just follow that voice. And, those studies that they do, they get people off the streets and they're, bashing someone's hand with a hammer or something, but it's just a rubber hand, and they're still pressing the button to do it. And, they've found that most people, they just are followers. That's why the modern world loves elections. The people just go, oh, that guy's, I like that guy's haircut, so they vote for people, who look a certain way or who are nice, most people aren't thinking. Most people aren't doing this type of research. Mark Ward, he's claiming to actually do this research, but he hasn't done it, has he? He's not, anyway, let's just continue through this. Alan Stewart says, Mark Ward is ginger snapping. I'm not really sure what ginger snapping is, whether that's a full hillbilly term or what it is, but maybe you can elaborate there, Alan.
Brother Brennan and Brother Surratt, the textual basis of the New King James is easy to find out. Yes. It's the Textus Receptus. The New King James preface says this clearly, as we'll see, and it's been out for over 40 years. And because you are leaders in the King James debate, you should have known this. If you doubted the New King James preface's claim, and if you have insisted that any sound translation based on the TR should be in principle acceptable, then you should have tracked down the truth of the New King James's textual basis decades ago.
And now I bet he's going to claim that we never read the preface, like with the King James issue. They never read the preface, it damns King James onlyism and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, I've read that New King James preface probably, I would say, at least 100 times. I've studied it. I've thought about it. I've gone through it. I used to be a New King James guy defender. If you think that I'm defending the King James to hyper level, like doing all these videos and running websites and all that, I used to, when I got say, I'm just that type of guy. If I really like something and enjoy doing something, I obsess about it and I love doing it. So if I was this interested in basketball, I'd probably be playing on a basketball team. You know what I mean? But and so I know about the New King James preface. I know about the issues there. And so, what Mark Ward might know about, and if he doesn't, it's sort of a bit of a blight on him, is this one. Let's bring this one into the mix. The original preface. Dung dung. The 1979 preface of the New Testament. The Greek text. Of greater importance than the beauty of language in the King James Version is the textual base from that work which was translated. The New Testament of the New King James is a useful and accurate revision. So they're talking about the New King James New Testament. So the Old Testament hadn't come out. This is in 1979. The Old Testament came out in 1982 and was revised in 1984. So the New King James, New Testament of the New King James is a useful and accurate revision based upon the traditional Greek text underlying the 1611 edition of the English Bible. Oops. It is commonly known that nearly all modern Greek translations of the New Testament are derived from a type of Greek text advocated by Brooke F. Westcott and Fenton J. Hort and others in the 19th century. The Westcott and Hort theory has been a leading view of textual critics and translators since that time. Although they are not massive differences between the two textual foundations of the New Testament, the net effect of the Westcott-Hort type text is to delete many words, phrases, and verses that are found in the Authorized Version. The publishers are familiar with the issues of the continuing discussion between textual critics. Recently, there has been a growing concern among reputable New Testament scholars that the 19th century text suffers from over-revision and that the traditional text is much more reliable than previously supposed. We have confidence, therefore, in presenting the New King James Bible, New Testament, without subjecting it to the strictures of the new critical text. So don't want to follow the critical text, okay? This publication is submitted in gratitude to God, and we trust that the divine author may use it for the blessing of many, as he has been pleased to use the beloved 1611 King James Version across the span of centuries. And so I just thought I'd throw that into the mix, that where is Scrivener? That's interesting. It's the text underlying the 1611, okay? So that's quite interesting. So that means if they're akin, that means like our position or Hill's position, they should just follow the King James and they'll get the text inadvertently. And just a bit of a clarification. I think I said inadvertently with one of the questions that I asked. No, one of the accusations about with Jonathan Sheffield, I said, you gave us the King James, you Anglicans, but you also gave us inadvertently, you also gave us Westcott and Hort. So I said it inadvertently wrong there. So I just sort of mentioned that when it came out of my mouth, I was like, that's the wrong word. But it's too late. There's nothing I can do about it now. So let's just continue.
You should not have repeated a rumor about it until you had checked it out for yourself. If you can't, check it out for yourself, my brothers, because you can't read Greek. And here I speak to anyone, not just Brennan and Surratt. Then say that. Say, I cannot read Greek, so I have no way of verifying the New King James's claim to be based on the TR.
So if you can't read Greek, you can't tell that there's differences. I mean, isn't this just amazing? I mean, you don't have to be able to read Greek to figure this out. If you just get, say, like where am I? Here we are. Or even that one would do. You could easily just get, a J. Green interlinear. You could easily just get, his later New Testament interlinear with his literal translation and the King James on one side, and everything's coded to Strong's numbers, and it has the Greek word there and the English representative underneath it. So you could easily just go through that, couldn't you? And just check and see if these things are true, because that's the Scrivener text. Now they do have things like the final amen in there. They don't say that they've done that. So, but anyway, let's just continue on. I'll just go through some of these comments first. Hannah says he's a ginger, redhead, and he is snapping mentally. Well, I'm a ginger too, so I'm a redhead. So Mark Ward, he'll probably go and cry in a corner and say, "Oh, they call me a ginger," And so I'm a redhead too, and so I'm not offended. I think that's fine to tease a ginger. It's a term for when redheads lose their temper, a ginger snap. Yeah, he's lost his temper and he's passive aggressive. He's not going to get his machine gun out and just shoot us in the face. He is going to poison us slowly. Hannah, it's a play on words. There is a spicy cookie named a ginger snap. Alan cleverly applied this wordplay towards Mark Ward's mental fragility. I see what you say now. Like he's a bit of a snowflake sort of thing as well. So I'm gonna just shut my Facebook down because there's lots of people just chatting on there all of a sudden. So let's continue.
I'm going to acknowledge some complexities later in the video, but the base facts are solid. And I've now described what's often said by those who are the most responsible people in the debate. Because the more responsible people are being openly irresponsible when it comes to the...
So I'm going to talk about the most responsible people in the debate. But the most responsible people are being irresponsible. So they're not responsible. Mark Ward thinks that I'm just, he doesn't even want me on his radar, okay? Because I'm saying stuff that's true. It's sort of like, I guess, if you're CNN, you want to deal with all sorts of stuff except for what Julian Assange is putting on WikiLeaks. You know what I mean? It's like, well, isn't this true? Haven't I done enough homework to show you that even if I just have 5 examples or whatever, isn't that enough to go, that's a concern to us? If my Bible said, for God so loved the world that he gave ... that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. If you had a choice to have the King James with that reading or the King James without that reading, I'm going to choose the King James that has the word, gave his only begotten son, not gave ... I want all the correct words. Even just one word, I would make a choice and go, oh, that one's better. I mean, look, if we had the wicked Bible or, thou shalt commit adultery, people are like, oh my gosh, that's so bad. But, we have these departures and Mark Ward will be like, oh, it's all fine and doesn't really affect anything. It's like, no. The thing that I didn't say about this, let me just quickly say the importance of this, the love of God, okay? So I went through the whole thing and explained it. Listen to the New King James. By this we know love, because he laid down his life for us. Okay, so New King James, you're reading it. This is how we know love. Jesus laid down his life for us. Okay, so we're looking at Romans chapter 5, verse 8. God commended his love toward us that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Wow, what an amazing verse. But is that what it's saying here? In the King James, it says, hereby perceive we the love of God, because he laid down his life for us. Okay, well, that's saying that same thing that I just said, but isn't it inadvertently saying, I'm using inadvertently again, he, the pronoun, the closest antecedent here is God. So that when you read this, it says, hereby perceive we the love of God. So we can see the love of God because he, who's the he? Well, it's the one who laid down his life for us. We know that's Jesus, but the closest antecedent is God. It's saying Jesus is God. So it's omitted a reference to Jesus being God in the New King James. Oh, but Mark Ward, no. This is unimportant. And I haven't even done a huge study into, departures from the, if I spent a month on this, I'd probably find, dozens and dozens of places where it does this. This is only just every now and then if someone says something on my Facebook group, I'm like, oh, okay. And then, if I get time, sometimes I read through stuff and I'm like, I just forget it or I just get busy. This is like, oh, okay, I'll put that up there. Then I get interested or someone asks me a question and I respond. But just that in itself, I want God in my Bible. do you want God omitted from the New King James? That'll make a really good clickbait sort of title. Why does the New King James not like God? And why do they strike through God, or why do they omit God without even admitting it in a footnote or whatever? So anyway, let's get back to this.
Textual basis of the New King James, the less responsible people go really wild. I can't tell you how many times commenters on my YouTube channel have insisted to me that the New King James is based on the critical text. They frequently accompany this claim with other statements that just don't make any sense. James, this. Mark word on words, the New King James Bible leans more towards the Vaticanus and Sinaiticus text on key verses. The Vaticanus text was rejected by the KJV translators as heretical. I have simple verses from each Bible to compare these truths. Notice the double period after each sentence. You don't
notice a double period after each sentence. Mate, it's YouTube. You know what I mean? Or you have to be grammatically correct on YouTube and Facebook, you know. When they start going into those sort of areas, it's like, you didn't capitalize this, or you spelled this wrong. It's just, okay. It's just, Mark Ward's got to be trolling here.
don't need a PhD to understand these simple things. I'm afraid the Jesuit college you have attended is the real reason for your misguided perception of truth. There's only one right English version.
The Jesuit college, is that the academy, like being involved with the Nestle Alarm text and trying to defend that? Is that what he's saying? No. Obviously, people like, there was a guy on one of Donny's programs the other day talking about the pre-trib rapture, so I listened through it. And he said, Darby, I think it was Darby or Schofield or one of those guys, he mentioned Darby, Schofield, Freemasons, Jesuits, and he just mentioned like 4 or 5 different groups. And I'm just like, why didn't you say Hitler as well? It just got ridiculous. It's like everything that you can think of that's evil is Darby, it's like, and you are related to Darby, it's like, anyway.
Today, and that is
so I understand some of these guys, just are like, you're a Jesuit. And so some people will say to me, do you think James White's a Jesuit? And I'm like, no, I think he's just wrong all by himself. He didn't need any help to be that wrong. He's just wrong by himself. Or if you just follow the critical text methodology, you'll be wrong. But you'll probably agree with Jesuits because they were trained by Eugene Nida.
KJV. I included the rest of the comment to show you the going wild part. Responsible people don't mock PhDs or call me a Jesuit.
Responsible people, like he's got some random guy on his YouTube. But anyway, this is his, he's riled up about this. Sometimes I get riled up about things. That's okay. That's fine. But I mean, just because you've got a PhD doesn't make you correct. There are plenty of things I've pointed out that are wrong with what people have said who have PhDs. People have PhDs on all sides. That there are plenty of Textus Receptus people out there who have PhDs. So well, you don't mock that.
And they usually don't use such innovative punctuation. Another commenter wrote, the NKJV is not a Textus Receptus. Keep lying yourself.
So Galvin says, off topic, this is just my observation, but Mark Ward seems to be just as, if not more effeminate in the way that he speaks and moves than White. So this is quite a common claim. I guess United States probably has a certain standard where it's like, oh, they're effeminate. And see, the thing is, the King James translates the word effeminate as, in the New King James, as homosexual. So he takes that like, they're saying I'm a homosexual, and all this sort of stuff. I think Mark Ward purposely does certain things so he can play the victim, so he's sort of, doing a certain thing, and then someone bumps into him. He's like, oh, you horrible person, I'm the victim here. I'm crying. I've got tears in my eyes, but lucky for you, I'm a nice guy, sort of thing. So everyone feels sorry for him and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I've had people that call me gay and call me all sorts of things, and it's like, big deal, But a lot of people say he acts effeminate. Okay, so this gets brought up, and it's probably worth its own show, because it is an accusation. But usually, like even here in Australia, if someone was to like say, "Hey, I played frisbee on the weekend," like seriously, like if you're on an average job site here in Australia and you're a roofer or something, and someone was like, "Hey guys, you want to come and play a frisbee?" It would be like he would drive off in his car, and people would be like, "Hey guys, you want to play frisbee?" They would mock that as effeminate. And so the thing is, but most of those guys would probably go and throw a frisbee to their dog or have fun with their kids or whatever, but some people that's just the way it is. And so I usually try to avoid that thing, because I think Mark Ward deliberately sort of makes himself a little bit like that so he can play the victim. But also what it does is that's his excuse to go, well, they've called me names, and so they're the irresponsible, King James guys. And so, yeah. But a lot of people say it. Like, you can't deny that. Responso irresponsibility. And that's sort of gone over my head, but that's not saying much. My head is a little bit fried at the moment. Alan Stewart says, "Hey, Hannah, that needs to be Latinized so it sounds like an academic term." Alan Stewart says, "Respect my authority." A PhD, a protected breed. Yeah, if you got a PhD, it's just sort of like you're part of a gated community, and no one's opinion can come in there, and you're always right. You become a pope. You're always right. Hell, some of them definitely have a superiority complex. When he's picking out, like, keep lying yourself. I mean, look, someone wrote the King James Version. Let's look up this guy. Who is this guy? CMAS Dans. Let's do some homework here. Okay, so I'll go to YouTube. Let's see who this guy is. Is it one of Mark Ward's friends? You know what I mean? Just trolling him, and he's like, "Oh, these guys are constantly on my page." He can be anonymous. Okay. I don't know. This Mexican dancer came up. It's a guy. Yeah, it looks like CMA. Okay, it's got an S there. Okay. Look at this guy. 20th conspiracy. Question everything you see. And there's no result, nothing. Like, question everything you see. He's just a no one. I mean, I block trolls sometimes. They just jump on here and just start spamming. And imagine if I'm all worked up about what someone said, and all these critical text guys. Why are you showing this on your video, Mark? It's just a nobody. The New King James is not a Textus Receptus. Keep lying yourself. And he's like, as if because he's got this group fallacy, this groupthink, where we're all part of this group. Well, we're responsible for what this guy's done, and our leaders, the New King James leaders, who I don't even know, they're responsible. It's irresponsible. If they say something, Mark Ward's going to say it's like an alien conspiracy, and then these guys are going to turn up. What? This video is worse than I thought. I thought it would, at least I wouldn't go into Alex Jones cookie, reptilian land, but we've gone there.
Every once in a while, I get a little cheeky with commenters in obedience to Proverbs 26:5. He said the New King James is not a Textus Receptus. I used a counter-argument that I first began employing back in 1985 in kindergarten in the important debates that we used to have on the playground. I said, "Guess, huh?" I could give you dozens of comments like this, flat denials that the New King James...
Dozens of people with, no videos, no information, just trolls, I mean, these could be TR trolls. They could be critical text trolls. They could be anyone. They could just be like atheists. You know, Mark Ward's bringing them up in the video, like, you know, in glee, like these people are into numerology and this and that, and it's like, okay.
This is based on the TR from wild King James onlyists. And if I engage these folks at all, I get utter confusion. They seem to have no earthly idea what based on the TR even means. They
Whoa. Probably because they're trolling you, Mark.
tell me that maybe the New King James used the TR, but that it has been influenced by the critical text or leaned.
Yes, it has been influenced by the critical text. I mean, the thing is, if you just simply look at the definition choices of the New King James, a lot of their definitions came from the Westcott and Hort text. And so if you read through something like a Vines, which I have here somewhere, Vines will usually say, yeah, the AV says this, but the RV says that, you know, it's redefined in a different way. So oftentimes the New King James redefines a lot of terminology. So it's not just the underlying Greek text of the critical text that was changed, but there was a lot of redefinitions. So that can creep into these Textus Receptus editions. So some people say J. Green's editions, it's, you know, it's a good TR Bible, but it's got Alexandrian definitions. So that's been one of the things that people said about J. Green's, you know, modern King James and others.
Toward it, whatever that means. They never.
I'll just rewind that.
What based on the TR even means. They tell me that maybe the New King James used the TR, but that it has been influenced by the critical text or leans toward it, whatever that means.
Well, if you should know what this means, Mark. Are you qualified to talk about the New King James? I'll debate you on the New King James. Like today, I'm prepared because, you know, I read it for years. I understand all these issues. So you've done a whole, you know, video on it, and this is like your second one in a row, and you've done 2 previous New King James videos, but it doesn't seem like you know much about this issue. You're sort of just going to a person here and there and saying, "Oh, they're the best critic of it," and you deal with what I'm saying.
They never present a shred of evidence that will help me understand what they're saying. As soon as I ask the most simple follow-up questions, they're gone faster than interested parties on Facebook Marketplace. Daniel Patrick Moynihan is famous for saying everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. Whether or not the New King James is based on the TR is verifiable. And
his conclusion, they say so in the preface. It's like, okay, that's enough. Don't deal with don't compare verses, don't compare Greek, because he said, you know, you really got to know the Greek, you know, to figure these things out. But you just got to believe them, and if you don't believe them, you're sort of lying. That's his conclusion. It's so strange.
Multiple ways. We're going to use a number of them. We're going to see that there is a tiny amount of complexity that I keep promising, a tiny amount of wiggle room for Surratt and Brennan, but not enough to justify their even-handedness, not enough to justify their words like claims and professes. The first and most important reason to believe that the New King James is based on the TR is that the New King James translators say that their New Testament is based on the TR. They say this in their preface. The translators and editors of the present work have not pursued a goal of innovation. They have perceived the Holy Bible, New King James Version, as a continuation of the labors of the earlier translators, thus unlocking for today's readers the spiritual treasures found especially in the authorized version of the Holy Scriptures. That's the general principle. They get more specific later in their preface. I won't read the whole thing, but you should. I'm going to pick out some highlights. First, note how the New King James translators express some disagreement with the dominance of the critical text used by most other English Bible translations today. The King James New Testament was based on the traditional text of the Greek-speaking churches, first published in 1516 and later called the Textus Receptus or Received Text. Although based on the relatively few available manuscripts, these were representative of many more which existed at the time but only became known later. In the late 19th century, B. Westcott and F. Hort taught that this text had been officially edited by the 4th century church, but a total lack of historical evidence for this event has forced a revision of the theory. It is now widely held that the Byzantine text that largely supports the Textus Receptus has as much right as the Alexandrian or any other tradition to be weighed in determining the text of the New Testament. The New King James translators don't express belief in the perfection of the TR, and this alone has gotten many King James onlyists to reject the New King James. But what they say is no more than what leading King James onlyists have acknowledged. Those readings in the Textus Receptus, which have weak support, are indicated in the side reference column as being opposed by both critical and majority texts. See pop-up notes. Again, even leading King James and TR defenders acknowledge that there are some readings in the TR that have little to no manuscript support, like Revelation 22:19 and the famous phrase in the TR, Book of Life instead of Tree of Life. Book of Life occurs in 0 Greek New Testament manuscripts.
And so he's talking about manuscripts that we have in our hand today. And so these guys basically claim Erasmus only had 5 manuscripts. But then you ask James White, that's what he says in his King James only controversy. Then you ask him in public and he'll say, well, between 6 and 12 manuscripts. And if you really push him and say, do you think he only had access to like 6 or 12 manuscripts? He'll go, oh, no, probably about 20. So which is it? And who's he referencing this off? Or is he just, is he smoking a crack pipe and just coming up with these numbers? You know what I mean? And this, to me, is part of that whole numerology thing. Just these numbers just come out of thin air and they're like, oh, 2 manuscripts, 5 manuscripts, 10, 20. Oh, okay, there's 50 manuscripts. Oh, yeah. Okay, he had access to 1,000 manuscripts. Because if he's going to say jump from 5 to 6 to 12 to 20, why can't I just say, well, he had access to 40 and just say it, on my, if I jumped on here and just kept saying it, I mean, I'm sure someone would repeat it somewhere. And that just seems what's happened. I mean, he worked with Aldus Manutius as a proofreader in his print shop. He was part of the Byzantine school that Aldus Manutius ran. He had access to, hundreds of Greek scholars who had fled from Constantinople and their scholarship and their manuscripts. And he had access to all the libraries of Europe. He went to the Vatican Library. He was in England for years. He was friends with Thomas More, friends with all the great humanists, and many of these guys did translations of the Bible into French and other languages. He was in correspondence with Luther. This guy knew his stuff. So anyway,
the New King James reads Book of Life, just as the TR does. The translators are just being responsible to point this out. Now here's the...
So we're talking about marginal notes here. Okay.
Quote, the Farthing quote. Listen closely. Because the New King James Version is the 5th revision of a historic document...
It's not the 5th revision because they count the Westcott and Hort text as a revision.
Translated from specific Greek texts, the editors decided to retain the traditional text in the body of the New Testament and to indicate major critical and majority text variant readings in the pop-up notes. Hear me clearly. For Chuck Surratt and Tom Brennan to question whether or not the New King James is really based on the TR is to call the New King James translators liars.
You see where he's going with this? It's sort of like... I'm just trying to think of an example, but it's pretty hard. Well, it's not really that hard. It's like the salesman is saying, because they say, oh, the Elizabeth said Textus Receptus. That's an advertising blurb, because it was in the preface. Okay, so isn't this an advertising blurb, according to their standards? But okay, let's say it is just academic and what they're saying is true. If it doesn't match up with the facts, then it's wrong. Whether they purposely did it or not, it's wrong. If I like the examples that I've just shown you of where the Textus Receptus and the New King James don't match up, but the King James and the TR match up, I mean, doesn't that just say that it doesn't matter what they've claimed there? Okay, so if you go to a restaurant and they claim to have the best, your fine dining on the East Coast, okay, so you go there. And it's not the best fine dining on the East Coast because you're eating it yourself. There's a big chunk of mold in the mashed potato. And you're like, oh, that's not good. So, the fish is undercooked. And if you eat it, you're probably going to get food poisoning. That say that someone can claim something, but it doesn't always mean they're truth. But Mark Ward's like, these guys have claimed it. So you should just... you shouldn't just dismiss that. Well, what I've found in life, Mark, is people make all sorts of claims, and especially coming from like Thomas Nelson. They had Good Morning Holy Spirit by Benny Hinn in 1990. They copped a lot of flack for that, but they kept publishing that knowing it was a heretical book because it was one of their best sellers. We're talking about a compromised company, but you've worked for Faith Life, who have Verbum, the Roman Catholic group, who publish the Pope's memoirs and how to use the Rosary and the Catechism and things like that. And they're part of Verbum, Faith Life. But now you're working for Crossway. They've done the ESV with the Apocrypha, the Catholic edition, and so it's like, that there can be influence of a compromised group. So we've even seen the first-hand testimony of someone like Kirk DeVitro, who says clearly that this is a bridge Bible. So let's just quickly look at what he said. He said this. So Kirk DeVitro said the Thomas Nelson guys, and so this is when it first came out. He said, we're all educated people here. We would never say this to our people, but we know that the King James Version is a poor translation based upon poor texts. But every attempt to give your people a better Bible has failed. They just won't accept them. So we have gone back and done a revision of the King James Version, a 5th revision. Hopefully it will serve as a translational bridge to eventually get your people to accept a more accurate Bible. So what was the ultimate goal here? Accuracy and, all that sort of stuff? No, it was for people to be guided toward the modern versions. So Thomas Nelson felt that was to be guided towards the critical text. There were, I guess, no Bibles based upon the majority text back then, but they've also, Hodges and Fasted have sort of brought out their majority text issue and all the rest of it. But someone like James Price, he worked in the Old Testament, he says to David Cloud, he says, I'm not a Textus Receptus advocate. This is the main guy of the Old Testament. He says, I happen to believe that God preserved the autographic text and the whole body of evidence that he's preserved, not merely through the textual decisions of a committee of fallible men based upon a handful of late manuscripts. The modern critical texts like the NA 2627, Nestle Aland, and United Bible Societies provide a list of the variations, So he's saying he's a critical text guy. Okay, so Art Farstead, he's like, this is in the preface. Today, scholars agree that the science of textual of New Testament textual criticism is in a state of flux. So then he goes on to say some people follow the Textus Receptus. For about a century, people have followed the critical text, and then he talks about finally there's some who follow the majority text. Okay, and so, but he's saying this edition follows the Textus Receptus, and for the most part it does, but when we look at what Dan Wallace says about the text, let's just see where he says this. Dan Wallace says none of the translators, as far as I know, thought the Textus Receptus was closest to the original. None of them. So why are they doing an update? Is this like something they're like, I really just want the archaic words out, and I really love, the Textus Receptus and the King James and the Reformation Bible? No, they're like, the King James is full of errors. How are we going to get those customers over to our product? Well, what we'll do is we'll create a half-half. We'll base it on the Textus Receptus. That'll keep people happy, but we'll sneak in, these readings that are redefinitions. So we'll put in a whole bunch of redefinitions, and we'll also put in, these marginal notes that will guide them to the critical text or to the majority text, whichever one they choose. Either one's sufficient for us, as long as they get away from the King James and Textus Receptus. And so that seems to be the push. And so if that is part of what they're doing, I'm just pointing out where they're departing from the Textus Receptus. all this other stuff, we can read into it and go, okay, well, this is the motivation or whatever. Mark Ward just seems to think that their motivation is just like crystal clear. And these people are all just honest, hardworking people who've, they've built this monumental work and we're teasing them for no apparent reason and all this sort of stuff. That's ridiculous.
It's not like a bunch of Christian biblical scholars could be mistaken about something as clear and objective as the textual basis of the New Testament portion of their Bible translation. To say that the New King James is actually based on the critical text, or even to suggest that the question is open to debate, is to say that all the stuff the New King James translators said about the rehabilitation of the Byzantine text in their preface was a feint. It was an elaborate deception meant to throw people off the scent of what they were really doing, namely sneaking corrupt critical text readings into the Bible and hoping no one would notice.
No, probably more so incompetence. That's what I think. I don't think they deliberately did these. It's like the MEV. I don't think they deliberately translated, what was it? Isaiah 58 verse 8, which they seem to have corrected in their 2024 edition. Now I'll type in Textus Receptus. Textus Receptus. There we go. That's better. Oh, I should type in MEV. That would help. I wonder if they've fixed that so you can't show that example anymore. But lucky for me, I've got it on my website. There we go. Textus Receptus, Modern English Version. So that's just loading up. I might just quickly go through some of these comments. Hannah says, we found our new leader. CMAS Dance. Yay, that'll be the next guy we're supposed to follow. Just Alan Stewart says that Cam's Dans. Sometimes actually when you read the name you realize that they're a troll, Cam's Dans. It's like, who's that? Should have been stronger any statement. Alan Stewart, Hannah, I don't know if this guy will cut it. It wasn't worded strong enough for me. Yeah. Faith, Alan Stewart, faith as a little child. Give him a chance. Yeah, he is your leader after all. Hey, Hannah, true. He does talk straighter than Surrett or Brennan. Hey, Hannah, keep lying yourself. See, it's starting to catch on. You guys keep lying yourselves. You make paper from trees. Papers make books. Keep lying yourself. Hey, Hannah, what do you think? The Bible came down from heaven? Really? So Calvin Clement says, I found a new channel this week that exposes many heresies made by modern version advocates. It is called Scroll Independent Ministries. Does anyone here know about this channel? If so, please give some feedback. So I'll actually go Scroll Independent Ministries. Independent Ministries. Okay, so we'll have a look at that. Okay. So I've loaded it up. Yep, and it started a video, so that'll come up in my history. So A. Hannah says, the shame I feel right now for following Surrett and Brennan. I call the New King James translators liars, the string musical instrument. Shame. Keep lying yourself. I like the lyrebird better. Keep lyrebird yourself. Alan Stewart. Calvin says, don't feel like the Lone Ranger at A. Hannah. I was born again for 24 years before even knowing there were differences between any Bibles and did not learn about it until 2002. Alan Stewart says, Calvin, that's great to hear. The Lord his sheep hear his voice and follow him. You guys keep lying yourselves. Okay, so modern English version, where were we going with this? Yes, so it's got some of the same problems as the New King James, which is quite amazing. But when we go to, yeah, here it is. I'll make it nice and big so everyone can read along and join us. In Isaiah 58, verse 8, they changed the KJV's reward, pronounced reward, which is often modernized as rear guard. They changed it into reward, revealing that the 47 translators totally misunderstood the correct meaning of the archaic reward, and also they didn't really do checks and balances like the men of 1611. So they have 47 translators. Obviously, that number is not because they found 47 really competent scholars and that was the maximum they had. They want to say, oh, this is the next King James. 47 is the number, that some people use. I've counted 60, but I think it was like 47 were alive at the time. Some of them died off. So the 47 translators' sales pitch is merely to create a false association with the King James Version so that people would assume that it went through the same cross-checking filtration process as the 1611 did, which was at least 14 times according to Bancroft's translation rules. I doubt it even went through 2 cross-checks in this verse. It is clearly an error and reveals their incompetence. It appears that they just saw the King James Version's reward and assumed it was reward, not even checking the New King James Version. So the New King James doesn't make this mistake. The MEV does. It also reveals that they didn't go to the Hebrew at all. And so there is an online edition of the King James that has reward there. So it's on Crossway. So Mark Ward works for Crossway. Maybe he should tidy this issue up. Maybe that's why they had the MEV all of a sudden corrected. He's probably contacted them and said, you guys are embarrassing yourselves. You got this horrible reading there since 2014, 10 years with this reading. And it's like Nick Sayers is just there. This is the drum that he's beating about the MEV. And it actually exposes that you didn't go to the Hebrew and check this. You actually just copied it from the King James. And obviously 47 other guys, 46 of them didn't come and check what some guy did. It's obviously the mistake of probably 1 person, maybe 2, but I doubt they'd make that mistake. But they didn't go to the Hebrew either. They're just copying from the King James. And so doesn't this show you how it's just incompetent? Doesn't that show you incompetence? Do I have to read the preface and how, they got the 47 guys and rewatch the videos of like my great grandfather was a King James translator? It's like, really? Are you going to go there? This genealogical link back? I'm sure I could probably find a King James translator in my lineage. It's quite amazing. But anyway, that's the MEV. That's the next one that Mark Ward will be harping on about. So I'll shut that down and let's continue. So doesn't that show you the incompetence? Hasn't the examples that I've shown show the incompetence of the New King James guys? So am I just saying they're lying or anything? No. That's probably their goal, but they haven't achieved it, have they?
Now, there's an important footnote here. The New King James translators are slightly unclear on the matter of the textual basis of the New King James Old Testament. This is what they say. For the New King James Version, the text used was the 1967 and 77 Stuttgart edition of the Biblia Hebraica, with frequent comparisons being made with the Bamberg edition of 1524 to 1525. I probably should do a whole video on this, and I may, but one of the scholars who worked on the New King James, James Price, has written a statement in which he explains that in the 8 places of variation between the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, usually called BHS, the modern edition of the Hebrew Bible that everybody uses.
So I actually got that 8 variation reading from the James Price page, but Stephen Avery says no. There's quite a lot more than 8. So I haven't got a definitive list. I guess the Old Testament is something that there's not as many changes, and these guys just go, we're departing from the Hebrew and we're doing whatever we want. So it's hard to really work out exactly what's going on. But it would be good to go through okay, King James and what text did they use? Because oftentimes it's like, oh, they used the Blomberg text, but there were constant updates of that text, just like with the Textus Receptus. And so people just say, oh, it's the text of Erasmus, but obviously we follow the text of Beza. So there were nuanced texts all the way up until 1611. So A. Hannah says, so the 47 MEV translators were not liars. They were just incompetent and lazy and maybe stupid. That's an opinion. Alan Stewart says, only the KJV translators are lazy, stupid, and incompetent. Keep lying yourself. Because, I mean, I remember, was it Timothy Berg was saying that type of thing? You know, they're just lazy. And yeah, it's just, isn't it amazing? Anyway.
And the Bomberg edition used by the King James translators. He made sure to go with the Bomberg in the New King James Version. I'm going to provide a link to his statement in the show notes. It was in a debate or response to D.A. Waite. So did the New King James translators make a mistake here? Why did they say they used BHS when that wasn't true? Does that show them to be dummies, and does it undercut their claim to have used the TR in the New Testament? No. As Price points out in his book on King James Onlyism, the situation in the Old Testament is massively different from that of the
so he's read Price's book, and Price is really toxic against the KJV cult, he calls it. So Mark Ward doesn't seem to be critiquing James Price, where he is very toxic towards Textus Receptus King James people and calls it a cult, like straight out, and he's really quite toxic about it. And so I've gone through all this material, like, I guess, 10 years ago.
New Testament. Very briefly, the King James translators themselves stray from Bomberg and go with the Vulgate, the Septuagint, or a medieval Jewish commentary.
So he's believing Price now because they don't go to the Vulgate or the Septuagint. So this is the thing. Mark Ward's just believing this now. So these guys who have worked on the New King James, he's seeing that these guys are just shining bright lights in the Bible translation world. But on examination, when you look at what they've done, it falls short. And so it falls short for a reason. And that's because they're believing the concepts like, Scrivener's at the end of his, Textus Receptus edition in his appendix, where he has, this is where words come from Latin and all the rest of it. And they're Latinized English words. I mean, English is a mongrel language. We have a lot of German, we have a lot of French, we have Arabic words, we have words from Hindi, we have a whole bunch of English went around the world and it grew. And so there are a lot of words that are from, yes, they're ecclesiastical, but it doesn't mean that that's a Vulgate reading. It's just etymology, you know what I mean? So, and Mark should know this.
In hundreds of places. He details these in his book. If BHS differs in only 8 places from Bomberg, it's much easier in the late 1970s and early 80s, when the New King James translators are doing their work, to use that common edition and to correct it in those 8 places than it is to.
So all we have to really do, get those 8 places, contact people like Stephen Avery, Will Kinney, these other guys, and go, okay, it's said that there's 8 places there. Can we show that there's 15 or 10 or even just one more that shows that the claims of Price on his website and in his book are wrong? And so I'm pretty sure, is it Doug Kudelick? Doug Kudelick is a student of Price, I'm pretty sure. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure I remember D.A. Waite talking about that. So anyway.
Go find some reprint of a Hebrew Bible from the 1520s. That's all I'll say on this matter for now. A second and briefer reason to believe that the New King James is based on the TR is that some King James defenders do acknowledge that the New King James is based on the TR. David Cloud said, "The New King James is the best of the modern versions since it is not based on the critical Greek text." He also called the New King James a deception, but I'll take what I can get. Kent Brandenburg told me in a comment on my blog, I've never thought or called the New King James a critical text Bible. I don't know who those people are, who do that. If I'm elsewhere and the churches use the New King James, I'm generally happy because I'm thinking it's from the same text as the King James. I am certain I've heard other leading King James onlyists acknowledge that the New King James is based on the TR, but I do not have their citations handy. Commenters, help me out. A third reason to believe that the New King James Version is based on the Textus Receptus in the New Testament is that the big three passages that I hear mentioned all the time by all King James defenders.
The woman caught in adultery, last 12 verses of Mark, and the commune handing him. Because they're in the New King James, well, he's like, it has to follow all the critical text, like as if, some random guy, what was his name? I can't find his name now. Camsdans. Okay, he's made this comment, and it's ridiculous.
They're all present in the New King James. Let's look them up together. Mark 16:9-20, present. John 7:53 to 8:11, present. 1 John 5:7-8, present. No brackets surround these passages, though textual footnotes do mention that the critical text does not include them. Briefly, the King James translators had textual footnotes too, like this one that you'll see on screen saying some copies read differently from the variants that they chose. So before King James defenders reject textual footnotes, they should consider the simple sky is blue fact that the King James translators did the same thing. I've never seen any King James defenders explain.
Okay, so he's speaking so fast. Usually when he gets really fast and he starts talking really fast, that's when he just wants to get something across and he doesn't want you to think about it. Okay, so let's go back.
And that the critical text does not include them. Briefly, the King James translators had textual footnotes too.
Yes, they had textual footnotes, but like I mentioned in my last video, they were textual footnotes so that people would gain confidence in the words they chose, not alternative readings as these guys redefine marginal notes as. So these were words to help people, to guide them, to show that the translators' choices were superior. And so when you look at the New King James, the marginal notes are there to guide you away from the text so that you'll go to the critical text or the majority text. And so they admit this in the New King James Study Bible, that you can choose your own adventure. You can omit the words that are there and replace it with the critical text reading or the majority text reading. So that they admit this. And so that's a whole different scenario to what the King James guys did by putting in these marginal notes saying, hey, look, we understand you've been reading Geneva for 50 years and the Bishop's Bible, and you had other TR editions. And look, we're just pointing out in these places where, well, the Geneva said this, but it's not actually correct. The Bishop's has this, but it's not good. But we're just letting you know that we know about this, but follow our reading in the text. It is superior. That's what the marginal notes were for, to tidy up 100 years of previous Bible translation work. That's what they were doing. They were bringing you to a point of confidence. The New King James is bringing you away from a point of confidence.
Like this one that you'll see on screen saying some copies read differently from the variants that they chose.
Yes, and so they put them in there because most of the time it was a difference in the Bishop's Bible, Geneva Bible, or sometimes just like a Coverdale edition didn't have that reading. So they're like, well, some copies have this and that. To let people know that it's not a typo. You don't have to go back to your printer and say, oh, look, it doesn't have this verse in it. It's like, oh, it's in the margin. It's letting you know that they've tidied this issue up for you. They've done all the homework for you. They've done the hard work. And you can trust that our text is correct, where the New King James is sort of like, okay, we're getting all the hard work that these King James guys have done, and we're guiding you into the critical text land, into majority text land, and also we're redefining a bunch of things because we don't think that they were accurate anyway.
So before King James defenders reject textual footnotes, they should consider the simple sky is blue fact that the King James translators did the same thing.
Okay, so politics in America what they were doing when they wrote the Constitution, Bill of Rights, that type of politics is the same type of politics that Mao was doing in China. It's politics. It's the same as like the Bolshevik Revolution. They were just doing politics. So it's the same thing. So it's exactly the same thing and exactly the same conclusion then. No. You'd think, well, there's different motivations. These people, none of them believed in a TR. None of them in the New King James. That's what Dan Wallace said. I mean, obviously it's different. And then they're guiding people to a critical text. And then they're guiding people to a majority text. Confusion. They don't even know which text they really want to guide people to. But, they clearly say you can choose your own adventure Bible in their study Bible.
Never seen any King James defenders explain how their criticisms of those textual footnotes in the New King James don't apply to the King James. In fact, someone could say that the New King James is helping the TR cause by showing how corrupt the critical text is in English.
Well, it is amazing. I've actually used the New King James footnotes to double check some of the foreign language Bibles that we've been going through. I'll go through and say, can you just double check this place? And I go through the footnotes of the New King James. So they have done us a favor by, there was a translator, he's over in Africa at the moment, and he was like, has anyone got a definitive list of all the changes? And so I pointed to, Scion of Zion and the TBS material, the textual data sheet and all the rest of it. But then I said, look, seriously, go to the New King James. They're marginal notes. 1 John 3:16 doesn't have a marginal note. There, of God is just deleted from the TR, from the King James, from Scrivener, and without footnote. But a lot of the other times they do have the reading, and so go check those places. And so inadvertently, it is there's that word again. It is helpful in that. But that's not the way that they actually design that Bible, those footnotes to be used. They're used to get you away from the text. Well, we're sort of using their material to get us closer to the text in foreign language work.
I won't say any more about those footnotes. I find them helpful. In any case, the big three passages are all there in the New King.
Mark finds them helpful. For what? For giving you a headache? You read it and go, I'm not sure if that's in there. Says critical text. This one says majority text. But Mark Ward's a critical text guy. So he's like, I found them helpful. What? For just going, that's what the Textus Receptus would say, but I'm a critical text guy. So for him, there's nothing invested in this. When that's the word of God for you, it's a whole different kettle of fish when you start, deleting the deity of Christ out of verses.
King James. A fourth reason to believe that the New King James is based on the TR is that a sampling of 5 significant and 10 random variants also match the TR.
10. Why would you go to random variants? Go to my website, Mark, and go through those. Go through the ones that I've brought up in these videos that I've said are important.
Here's the significant ones. Acts 8:37 is probably the passage I hear about the next most.
Like this is just hilarious. So.
After the big three. There it is in the New King James, with no brackets. Then Philip said, if you believe with all your heart, you may. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. John 1:18 is another passage I hear about often. The TR refers to Jesus as the only begotten Son. The critical text following different manuscripts refers to him as the only begotten God. The New King James matches the TR here quite clearly and not the critical text. John 5:4 is another verse I hear about regularly from King James defenders. It's not included at all in the critical text, but it's there in the TR and it's there in the New King James. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Fourth example, 1 Timothy 3:16. This is another one I hear about all the time from King James and TR defenders. They believe the critical text to be attacking Jesus' deity here. The critical text has, he was manifested in the flesh. The TR, and therefore the New King James, has, God was manifested in the flesh.
Yes, but look at how it's written. It's written so it's like a poem. God was manifested in the flesh, justified in the spirit. They've written it like a psalm, and that comes from Hort, who popularized the theory that it was a hymn. And that's why the solecism, the predicate without a subject in the Greek, that probably the greatest grammatical blunder in the Greek text of the Nestle-Aland grouping of texts, having God changed into os, or which means who, they had to make out that Paul just started singing a song. God was manifest in the flesh was changed to who was manifest in the flesh, or who appeared in the body, or however they translate it. So there's no mystery of godliness there. It's gone, because the greatest mystery of godliness, who appeared in the flesh, and it's so abrupt that they have to turn it into a song that he broke into. So these guys were just like, I guess having an ecstatic experience, and Paul's just there. 1 minute he's just talking, and people are writing down what he's saying, and then he's just broken. He got the guitar out and started singing that song. We got to make that song. Maybe we should. Maybe I should put it into Udio. That's what I'll do. I've got to write that down, because Udio, that's the new Google tool that you can write your own songs there and all the rest of it, and it just pumps them out in like 1 minute. So Udio song for 1 Timothy 3:16. It seems to be all of 3:16s are destroyed. Anyway. So, yeah, it doesn't change in the New King James, but they have this type of rubbish in it, where it's a song. It's no way that is a song. And the only reason they say it's a song is because of the Greek grammatical error. So why does New King James follow suit?
Fifth, Matthew 17:21 is another verse that's not present in critical text Bibles, but there it is in the New King James. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. Those are 5 significant variants that I hear about all the time. In each case, the New King James clearly...
And so why are you going with variants you hear all the time in a completely different argument? Why are you bringing that into it? Why not just go somewhere where people have made the argument and said, this is missing in the New King James? It's because he's not dealing with the facts, is he? This is deceptive. Now look at what... you guys are just cracking me up. Ginger snap. I can't read your comments, guys. I gotta keep going. Anyway, I will get to them, but this is, or else I'll just be in hysterical fits. So let's just keep going.
Translates the TR and not the critical text. Now, here are 10 less significant places of textual variation. Rapid fire. I'm going to go through these really fast.
So the first 5 were significant, and these are less significant. So, but they were pretty meaningless, weren't they? Now he's going to go to some other more meaningless ones.
I chose these by my random New Testament verse picker. I'll actually be using my King James Parallel Bible site for visuals, which means you'll be seeing the King James and not the New King James. But I checked the New King James in each case. First, the New King James goes with the TR in Revelation 18:6, which says, reward her even as she rewarded you, instead of what the CT, the critical text, says, reward her even as she has rewarded. The object is meant to be filled in by the context, in other words. Second, the New King James goes with the TR in Revelation 3:8, which says, and no man can shut, instead of which no man can shut. Third, the New King James goes with the TR in Mark 10:2, which says that the Pharisees came and asked Jesus a question. Critical text Bibles often translate the verb the same way as asked, even though it's imperfect, was asking in the Greek critical text, because that's just what you do in English. So the latter difference is sort of untranslatable, but that article there is showing the New King James follows the TR. Fourth, the New King James goes with the TR in John 15:26, but when the helper comes. Critical text Bibles sometimes say but too, even though it's not in the Greek, because it's of the critical text, because it's almost demanded by context in English. Fifth, the New King James goes with the TR in Luke 20:28, which is the difference between if a man die without children and if a man be without children, in other words, when he is dead. So there's no difference in meaning, but the Greek is clearly different, and this has to be reflected, and the New King James reflects the TR text. Sixth, the New King James goes with the TR in John 16:10, which is I go to my Father versus I go to the Father. Seventh, the New King James goes with the TR in Matthew 27:22, which is the difference between they all said to him, let him be crucified, and they all said, let him be crucified. The to him is the difference. Eighth, the New King James goes with the TR in Matthew 25:20, which is the difference between I have gained 5 more talents besides them, and I have gained 5 more talents. No besides them. Ninth, the New King James goes to the TR in Ephesians 3:14, which is the difference between I bow my knees to the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, and I bow my knees to the Father. 10th, The New King James goes with the TR in Matthew 19:3, which is practically identical to what we saw in Mark 10:2, selected randomly, so I won't discuss it further. I could go on and on. I could do more random sampling. I surely could.
I surely could. Why do random sampling? Why not get specific? My webpage has been up since 2008. Now, Mark Ward mightn't like me. He might have blocked me on Facebook. But you can't just ignore these arguments. At least if you don't even want to mention me, at least deal with these arguments. Anyway.
Dozens, hundreds of places. How much do I have to do before the people who ought to have just read the New King James preface and taken their word for it are satisfied?
It's so bad. Like so bad. Maybe Mark Ward is like comedy for us. It's just comic relief. Maybe this is someone's just got to be like paying this guy. Like, oh, you just got to. Maybe this is like a big hoax, and he's just going to come out and say, "Guys, I've just been like keeping you guys busy for years, but don't worry, I'm a TR guy, and I was just joking with you. You know, it's got to be comedy. You know, he's basically saying you just trust what they said in the preface, but when you examine what they've done, it's like, oh, hang on, they didn't do it here. You know." And then he's going to these places that get talked about when you're comparing the King James and critical text Bibles. And he's like, let's go to the main ones. And it's like, oh, that's not really a good methodology. Okay, we'll go to random ones. I've got a special button that I press and random things come up. It's a bit like saying, oh, there was an axe murderer at, 157 High Street in Unit 9A. You know, it's specific. We're showing you specific verses. He's just like, let's just do random things. How long do I have to do this for? You know, before, that's not looking into it, Mark. It's ridiculous. Anyway.
Can you still sit on the fence with Brother Brennan and Brother Surratt after seeing this evidence? Is the New King James based on the TR or not? It is. But let's go further in another way. A fifth reason to believe that the New King James is based on the TR is that in the very rare cases in which the very most gifted and trained King James onlyists have named to me specific passages in which the New King James reading...
The very most gifted and trained. I wonder if this is this... who is it? A. Hennis says, Mark Ward should read Kamazdan's book, Exposing James Price. Keep lying yourself. You guys should be banned from being on this platform. I've got to block you guys. I shouldn't read through this because I know I'm just going to crack up laughing. Alan Stewart said English goes down dark alleys, robbing other languages for loose vocabulary. Praise the Lord at Calvin Clemens. They have maybe 9 textual critical notes throughout all 66 books. Probably more than 9. I can't remember how many, but it was small. Yeah, I think there's 16 text critical notations in the whole King James. And usually it's because like the Bishop's Bible or Geneva Bible have those issues. So they're trying to, they're in a society saturated with Christianity. Like Shakespeare's using Geneva Bible and all the rest of it. So obviously they're going to have to explain a few things, you know. So that's why they did it. Not like, here's an alternative choice. You can go to that manuscript. Or no, they're like, well, we've discovered better things and this is what this is what the scholarship has proven for us today. I like how Mark Ward can just accept the only begotten God as a legitimate reading without batting an eye. Keep lying yourself. Mark Ward had to angrily write the script and then deliver it angrily. Extra points for extra finder snap. Keep lying yourself. I think you meant ginger snap there. Extra points for extra ginger snap. Cam's Dan's will speak about the cult picnic. Keep lying yourself. Yeah, ginger snap. So that was corrected. Spicy cookie. Nick, or we can't have a laughing revival. Well, the laughing revival, that was said to be a move of the Holy Spirit. That's what they said. Are you distrusting men of God who said things? Are you coming against the Holy Spirit? It's these type of things. Isn't it similar? You coming against God. You're coming against the Holy Spirit. You're saying these New King James guys are dishonest. You're saying that there's charlatans out there. It's like, yeah, you don't have to look far. Peace. I'm not saying that all of them are charlatans or whatever. I'm just saying that their work has flaws in it, and we're just pointing that out. And then we're called liars by Mark Ward. So Shay T is in the house. Calvin Clemens says Mark Ward and this charade is so ridiculous. Yes. Mark Ward, trust but don't verify. Keep lying yourself. Edward Hills had a PhD from Harvard in textual criticism. Yeah. So why is Mike Ward speaking against him? Alan Stewart, hi James, enjoyed the interview with Jonathan. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Hannah, good point at James Sheffield. Helg says Mark Ward is listing those places where the New King James follows the TR. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? We're like, he does a whole thing on people are saying the New King James doesn't follow the TR. So Mark was like, let's look at all the places where it does follow the TR instead of the places that people are actually talking about. Yeah. And just a comment like that is gold, because that just sums everything up. It's like, and exactly what I've been saying about Mark Ward. There's a big earthquake in Tokyo or something. A building collapses in the middle of the city. All the news cameras are there like, look at this building's fallen down. And Mark Ward turns up and goes, yeah, but look at the buildings around. They're all in pristine condition. They haven't fallen. And it's like, yeah, can you turn your camera around and show behind you? It's like, no. We're looking at this building. Look, it was built in 1956 and it's a beautiful building. Look at the paint job. Look at the windows. It's so nice. It's like, why don't you look at the disaster zone? We're like, okay, there's a disaster zone here, and you're just ignoring it. But that's what we've come to expect with. What's a name we can give him? James White, Dan Wallace, like Mames, James Steenless or something. Like mix them all together into this 10-headed monster. Calvin Clemens says, yeah, Helg Evanson, and only those places.
Readings are allegedly based on the critical text. They are almost always simply wrong. It was on my blog, like I said, and I'd written a post making something like the case that you just heard, a little less detail. I challenged King James onlyists not to tell falsehoods about the New King James's textual basis. I find those falsehoods so frustrating because they're the only thing standing in between the consciences of some TR defenders and reading the Bible in their own English. I hope I've stayed on the handle, however. Brandon Berg replied in the comments with 19 alleged examples of places where the New King James departed from the TR. I've wrestled with...
Wow, he found 19. That's interesting.
Whether to take the time to go through all of these here. I decided I just can't. This video is already too long. I'll have to select just a few representatives. If you want to go through the whole list, I'll have a link in the show notes to the relevant blog posts. Brandon Berg ended up giving me what I would call 4 categories of allegations. The first...
Okay, so I'm just going to pop this down. He said that it's in the show notes. Okay, so this is James White Price responding to D.A. Waite. It says D.A. Waite did a whole bunch of videos about James Price. Okay, so I'll jump on that. I don't think he's put it in the show notes. Buy me a coffee. Follow transcript. Okay, so anyway, I got the James Price one, but the Brandenburg thing, it's not in there, but it might be on his blog or whatever. So let's continue.
Category were places where he was simply wrong. He was erroneous. And to his great credit, in the only instance that I've ever seen him do, he officially backed down on some of these. He said, I defer here.
Okay. And so, Brandenburg, he sometimes posts on the Textus Receptus Academy. I don't usually engage with what he said because usually he's just got like a sort of statement and it's sort of copied and pasted, and it's like, okay, well, that's what you're saying. Some people do interact with that. Sometimes I might just like it or whatever, but I don't really. I know Kent Brandenburg is good friends with Thomas Ross. Now I know him from the debate, but if you actually watch through the videos that I critiqued the debate, I had no idea who Thomas Ross was before the debate. So, Brandenburg, he's prolific all over Facebook. So he's a bit like Will Kenny. You can't but see his stuff. But I haven't really extensively gone and read through his stuff. Now, I did go to their website. The Thomas Ross debate led me there. And I was like, man, there's a lot of material here. It'd be great to go through and data mine all this. But I just haven't had time. So,
for example, Kent had charged that in John 10:12, the critical text leaves out the last word probata, that sheep, and the New King James follows that, while the King James follows the TR, which has that word probata, meaning sheep. I countered, the New King James uses natural English word order, producing an anaphoric rather than a cataphoric pronominal reference, because the former is easier to follow, rather than what a woodenly literal English translation might require. If the New King James followed the critical text, it would not have sheep anywhere in the last clause.
So I think, look, I've got like 10 minutes to go on this video. I'd rather go do a second part. I'll go through these issues that he's bringing up. I'll find the Brandenburg list. I'll see if there's, anything that's really, fully exposing the New King James departing from the TR. And what I'll do is I'll spend a bit of time as well just going through and scouring the internet, looking for argumentation about the New King James departing the TR. And I'll just, from my own memory and just thinking about things along the way, I'll just check these things out. And I'm sure that, because sometimes even too, I'll be working on a Bible project or I'll be going through my website and I take notes. So sometimes what I do is I email them to myself, and it's just because I know I'm going to forget things. So it's just so it's there. Sometimes in my notes on my phone, I'll be reading through and go, oh, that's something important. So I'll put it in there with like New King James Version or whatever. So I'll go through my emails. I'll go through my notes on my phone. I'll go through Brandenburg material, and I'll probably rewatch this a few times, just this end part, which is like 10 minutes. So, I can go through it a few times, get the gist of what Brandenburg was saying, or else it's going to be like the second video that I did last time. It was sort of not really enjoyable unless I was engaging every topic. And I really want to engage these and see if these are strong arguments or just weak arguments. Sometimes they're just weak arguments. Sometimes things are synonymous. But we want to go through all that, and I don't really want to just rush through this last 10 minutes and because it feels lousy doing that. I really want to give an answer to people. So I'll turn this into a part 2. Now, most of you know that I've already done an interview this morning with Jonathan Sheffield, and this is my second video. So I am going to have to go. But God bless you guys. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Alan said, Mark Ward doesn't think each and every word is important. Yes, the words of God are found in manuscripts and in doctrines, but not in the words itself. Mark Ward doesn't think that much at all. He keeps lying himself. Look, see, your humor has corrupted Calvin Clemens now. He's lying himself. Alan Stewart, have a good one, Nick. Keep lying yourself. Well, at least we found out who our new leader is. What was it? Cam's Dance. Yep. Good old. Maybe we could do a hail Cam's Dance with the salute. But here in Australia, they've banned the Nazi salute. If you do it, you can get fined and everything. It's so ridiculous because if you want to know who the neo-Nazis are, if you're an undercover cop or anything like that, and you're trying to infiltrate a group, or usually the people standing on the corner saluting, you go, oh, there they are. You know what I mean? And as if they're going to stop it at home, you know, they're going to go home and go, oh, sure, let's all do some salutes, you know. To me, it's just ridiculous. But anyway, Calvin Clemens says, God bless you too, my brother from down under. Yes, guys, thanks for joining us. I'm going to shut this down. And I'll probably, during the week, I'll probably do another program on the New King James and Mark Ward and go through these issues that I talked about. But thanks for joining us, guys. God bless you. I'll play my little outro, and all the best.